topic today is heat pumps, the new incentives from Mass Save, which is very exciting. And while everyone's coming in, let me just briefly introduce you to Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We started in 1982 as an oil buyers group, going to the oil dealers and saying, we've got a group of people and they'll all come to you if you offer them a discount on your price. And we still offer that service. But since then, we've grown a great deal and we've expanded to include wind power, connecting consumers to wind power generators, like the nuns in Rentham who wanted to put up a wind turbine and needed funding. And we said, we'll sign a contract with you to buy 10 years worth of your RECs, your renewable energy certificates. And then we'll find people like you and me who care about climate to purchase a share of those and help fund your project in that way. So we've done that for many years. We've connected people to trusted sources for solar power. We've connected people to discounts for electric vehicles. Everything we do is about using consumer power to drive the transition to renewable power. And we have a really strong advocacy program where we're a recognized authority on consumer energy issues in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So our agenda for today, first we're going to start with just some introductions as we've been doing, and some ground setting on some level setting on what is a heat pump. And then we'll jump into the new incentives in Massachusetts and then focus on what are the conditions that make a heat pump most cost effective, because that's what a lot of us want to know is, does it make sense for our from our house to switch to a heat pump now? Should we wait, etc.? And then how to get the information you need, and we'll have a good 30 minutes for your questions at the end. So about heat pumps, these are an electric source of heat. They can be used. They can use ductwork, or they can provide heat without any duct work in your house. So ducted or ductless. The illustration that we have here is a ductless mini split. Split because there's one part outside and one part inside. They can be whole home or partial home. So you can completely get rid of your fossil fuel system and have only a heat pump providing your heat. They are that efficient so that you can rely on them. Or you can augment your current fossil fuel system with a heat pump, lessening the amount of fossil fuels that you use, but still using a heat pump for a good portion of your heating and cooling. The heat that's being transferred into your house can be transferred from the air outside your house or from the ground. The refrigerant tubes can go through the ground. They can even go through water. But generally, we're talking about air source heat pumps in this presentation. And you may have heard, oh, they're not efficient enough to provide heat in New England. If you're hearing that, somebody has old information. It used to be that there were only heat pumps for moderate temperature climates, but now there are cold climate heat pumps that are very efficient down to very cold temperatures, -15, and it is still working efficiently, -15 Fahrenheit, and it's still working efficiently. And because it runs on electricity, it can be a carbon-free source of heat. And this is virtually the only heating system that can be carbon-free, unless you're supplying your heat on with your own woodlot and you are replacing as many trees as you cut down. And even that some would wonder because the trees take too long to grow. So just to get a sense of what we're talking about. And now the exciting news is that we are launching a heat pump program in 2022. Green Energy Consumers is. Our goal with this program is to make it easier for energy consumers to find trusted vendors and get sound advice about the quotes from those vendors. This will be independent quote comparison from our partner, independent system design consultations from our partner, and general advice, and a network of trusted heat pump installers. We don't have that list yet ready at this point, but it will be ready later this spring. And our partner is Abode Energy Management. Mike Simons is with us from Abode, and he'll introduce himself in a moment. But basically, Abode oversees the home performance contractors in Mass Save. They are building science focused, and they run heat pump programs for 9 municipal power companies. So they really have a lot of experience in being able to connect consumers to trusted vendors. And you'll be able to use our landing page for access to the referrals, the consultations, and the quote comparisons. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Simons. I'm with Abode. Yeah, so more or less for the last 10 years, or 11 years, my professional life has all been about Mass Save, running energy audits, training energy advisors. But really the last 3 years has been all about learning about heat pumps, do's and don'ts as far as best practices. And I've been running the consultations for the last 2 years. I can say for my own home, I have a 100-year-old home in Central Mass. I installed 6 mini splits this past summer. This past winter, I didn't turn on my steam boiler one time for heat. So I can say that, even during blizzards, even during single digits, this equipment works if it's sized appropriately. And there are certainly strategies that can take place to make this equipment more affordable than I think what a lot of contractors are kind of first presenting with some of their solutions. So totally happy with to try and work with anyone in this organization to try and find a project to meet their goals.
Great, thank you, Mike. Now, getting into the heat pump incentives from Mass Save. These are new this year, and there are 2 things that are particularly exciting about these new incentives. The first is a whole home incentive. Now, what do we mean by whole home? We mean that this would be your exclusive heating system, the heat pump. It would be designed to produce 100% of the heat that you would need. And you would sign you wouldn't necessarily have to remove your existing fossil fuel system, but you would need to sign an affidavit saying that you are not intending to operate it. So the exciting thing about the $10,000 incentive is that it applies, it is regardless of system size. So if you have a small house, you can still get that $10,000 rebate, and that means that a larger percentage of the total cost is going to be covered by that rebate, which is particularly useful because small homes used to, if you're just getting a small heat pump, you would get a relatively small rebate. The other exciting thing about the new incentive is that gas heated homes are now included. It used to be that gas heated homes would qualify only for a small cooling and efficient cooling incentive, which really didn't go very far in terms of buying certainly a whole home system or even a partial home system. So gas heated homes are now eligible for the whole home rebate. And if you go to the Mass Save website, you'll see a chart similar to the one that I'm showing here. Now, the whole home rebate, by the way, would apply to every unit in a home. So if you had a duplex, and both sides of the duplex had a fossil fuel system, both would qualify for that $10,000 to remove that or displace the use of that fossil fuel system in each of the units. So that's a great thing as well. Now, you can also maintain your fossil fuel system as a backup and use a heat pump for part of your house. For instance, if you have a great room where your living room, dining room, and kitchen, say, are all open to each other, you could put a heat pump there and have the core of the house where you spend most of your day heated by that heat pump, but still have the fossil fuel backup to heat the periphery of the house, the bedrooms, etc. And that rebate is up to $10,000, but it is based on the size of the system, and that size is measured in tons of heating capacity. The size of the rebate is, or the incentive is $1,250 per ton, and the amount of capacity that you need would be measured by the installation company. They would come and do a heat load assessment in your home, and many homes might be able to be heated with 3 to 5 tons of heating capacity, and so that rebate would be in the 3,000 to 6,000 range, roughly. And these, again, are all just ballpark numbers. You'll need to have somebody come into your home to make those assessments. If you are going to have a partial heat pump system, you will need to have an integrated control in order to qualify for the Mass Save rebates. An integrated control is a thermostat that connects both your heat pump and your fossil fuel backup system. And it seamlessly toggles between the two systems at a set switchover point. I believe the switchover point for gas-heated homes and oil-heated homes is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and for propane-heated homes, it is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's programmed into the integrated controls, and when the temperature hits that point, seamlessly your fossil fuel system will turn on and your heat pump will turn off. And the integrated controls are incentivized as well. So it's a great thing, and it does make it possible to have a hybrid system where you have the heat pumps and the fossil fuel systems. Mass Save is also incentivizing ground source heat pumps. These are also called geothermal systems. The incentive is potentially higher for a geothermal system, and that's because the installation costs are more expensive. These are more efficient than air source heat pumps. So if you do have open space on your property, then that's definitely a great thing to consider. There is another technology. It's called an air-to-water heat pump, also called a hydronic heat pump. And this takes heat out of the air, or I suppose it could be a geothermal as well. And it puts the heat into a water system that then could be pumped through your home. This is most applicable for radiant flooring. So if you currently have radiant flooring that's heated with a fossil fuel system, you could consider exploring an air-to-water heat pump system. Unfortunately, there are very few experienced installers in hydronic heat pumps in New England, and that is why it's a very expensive proposition for any other type of hydronic heating. There's no plug and play. If you have a hot water baseboard or steam radiators, all of those things are not really plug and play with heat pumps at this point. There is an incentive, but as I said, there are so few experienced installers that it is a very expensive proposition at this point. Now, that said, it doesn't mean if you have a hydronic system, it doesn't mean that you can't have a heat pump. It's just that you can't use your hydronic distribution system to spread the heat through your home. You would have to use either ductwork or use the ductless heat pumps to heat your home instead of the baseboard or the radiators that you're used to. There are also heat pump water heaters. These are 2 to 3 times more efficient than electric resistance tanks. So if you have an electric tank, definitely when you next are replacing that, you want to look at a heat pump water heater option. These do need adequate space for air exchange, so you can't put them in a closet or some, a small space like that. And because it's electrical, it needs its own wiring. If you don't currently have an electric tank, you may need to put in a new circuit for it. And it does need a condensate drain. So if you have an older type of water heater that doesn't have a condensate drain, you would need to put in that as well. And it does make the space around it colder and drier because it is pulling the heat out of the air that's around it. So if you had a finished basement, for instance, and you were heating a space right on the other side of the wall from your water heater, you would need to put in insulation between those two spaces, because otherwise you'd be the heat pump water heater would be robbing the heat from the conditioned space in your basement. There have been federal tax credits up to $300 for mini splits as recently as last year. But whether that's still in effect for this year, you would need to consult with a tax professional. And for the geothermals, there's a very significant tax credit. If you have the space for a geothermal system, then that's something you might consider, and you could build that tax credit into the cost of doing it. But first, you want to check with a tax professional to make sure that it's still applicable in this year. I'm not a tax professional, so can't vouch for that. And now a little bit about what types of homes are most cost-effective for installing a heat pump. First is, what type of fuel do you currently burn for your heating? If you have propane or electric resistance or heating oil, those are all pretty likely to be a good bet for cost effectiveness, especially with this year's prices being so high. But even looking at an average of the last 5 years, those are all pretty likely. Certainly, if you have electric resistance heat, if you have electric baseboard, then a heat pump will save you money because it's going to be much more efficient than the electric baseboard. It's roughly 3 times more efficient than electric resistance. So it's definitely a good thing to think about if you have electric resistance. Now, if you do have natural gas as your heating fuel, this is the least likely to be cost effective. But even there, I see that someone has muted me. Let's see. I think I'm unmuted. Even there, with gas prices being so high this winter, You do want to get a cost comparison to see if a heat pump would be cost effective for you. And certainly if you have solar panels, if you own those solar panels and are not leasing them, then it's very likely that the solar panels would make your heat pump cost effective with your gas heat, because the cost of your electricity is built into the cost of those solar panels, and would likely make your heat pump cost effective. Now, also, if you have gas heat and you have an existing older air conditioning system, a central air conditioning system, when that system needs to be replaced, it's definitely worth considering a heat pump at that time, if not before, for two reasons. One, the ductwork might be able to be used by the heat pump, so no expense in terms of that. A relatively simple installation cost with central AC ductwork already existing in the home. And also, a heat pump provides heating and cooling in the same system. So replacing, if you need to have central AC, replacing either the AC or your current fossil fuel heating system with a heat pump means that you won't have to replace the other. You're getting two for the price of one. So that's definitely a good thing. And a heat pump is going to be 2 to 3 times more efficient than conventional cooling systems. So there's definitely a savings to be had in replacing your air conditioning. Now, the least expensive installation condition is when you have a furnace instead of a boiler. Just to clarify, a furnace provides hot air and a boiler provides hot water. So if you have a furnace, you have hot air ductwork. And having that ductwork means that you can relatively easily install a heat pump that could use that ductwork in a whole home situation. Also, the heat pump could be used to just augment the furnace in part of the home, again, tapping into the ductwork in part. You do need to make sure that the condensate associated with the heat pump is addressed. Sometimes if you're reusing ductwork, that can be a problem. The condensate itself can be a problem. And of course, the ductwork has to be in good condition, and it has to be accessible to the installation workers. So if all your ductwork was in the walls, it's possible that there would be a problem there. And the reason, again, that we say a furnace is a better candidate for replacement than a boiler is that heat pumps do not produce hot enough water to easily replace boilers. Your boiler, is bringing water up to a very high temperature, and a heat pump is just never going to get to that temperature. So there's not as I said, a plug and play option for swapping out the one for the other. Now, if your home does lack ductwork, which many of our homes do, you can still convert to a heat pump system, either a ducted or in some cases a mini ducted system. Again, a single head could serve. A head is the indoor air handler part of the heat pump system. A single head could serve a large open area. You can have single zones or multi-zones, heads that are connected or heads that are separate. And you can have a mini ducted head serving a few adjacent small rooms. Say you had 3 small bedrooms on an upper floor with an open attic above. You could relatively easily have a heat pump head in the attic with very small ductworks connecting those bedrooms unserved by the single head. And I just wanted to point out this is a floor-mounted heat pump. So we often talk about the mini split heat pumps being the horizontal box that is head height or above, mounted on a wall. But you can also have floor-mounted air handlers, and you can have ceiling-mounted heads. So it is a very variable design options. In all cases, you will need space outside for the condenser. So if you have your home that goes right up against the property line, there might be a problem there. Or if it's a tight urban lot, you might have trouble finding a place for the condenser. And you also need to protect the condenser from the snow. It can't sit right on the ground, because if it gets covered with snow, then there's not going to be enough airflow to be able to do the heat exchange that it's doing. So how to find the information that you need to make a decision? You definitely want to look at the energy efficiency program that applies to your home. If it's Mass Save or one of the municipal electricity providers, these are two consortiums supplying energy efficiency programs to the municipal power companies. And also in Rhode Island, there's EnergyWise Rhode Island, also referred to as Rise Engineering or simply National Grid. And there is a program in Rhode Island as well. Their incentives are not as good as Massachusetts at this point, but there are incentives there nonetheless. And our heat pump program, the URL ends with Abode, which again is our partner, ABODE, so greenenergyconsumers.org/Abode. And the access to the online portal to find trusted heat pump installers is going to be free. Again, that'll be starting up later this spring. The independent quote comparison, we have negotiated a discount on the services that Abode usually charges for the fee that Abode usually charges for this service. So it's only $50 for people who come in through our program. And they can also do the hour-long consultations, which is really so valuable if you're thinking about spending thousands of dollars on a relatively new technology. It's great to be able to talk to somebody about that. And again, we have a discounted fee for that consultation of $100. So we're really pleased to be launching this and pleased to be working with Abode. So just in closing, if you like this webinar, we do have webinars all the time. There are two in the coming week. Race to Decarbonizing Massachusetts, and is a used electric car right for you? You can always find our events at greenenergyconsumers.org/events. And you can find our recorded webinars on YouTube at youtube.com/massenergy/1982. Mass Energy, as many of you know, was our name for many years until we rebranded ourselves Green Energy. And we do invite you to donate. This month, we have a very generous donor who's going to match up to $20,000 worth of donations. So we encourage you to give now if you can. Again, donations are what support our very strong advocacy program and allows us to expand our Drive Green program, our Green Municipal Aggregation program, which is bringing green electricity for everyone in lots of municipalities around the region. So we hope you'll consider that if you have a chance to support our nonprofit mission. And now we'll take questions. Larry is going to read those, and Mike is going to answer them, or I can help with answering them as need be. Larry, will you read us a question?
Loie, first of all, I want to thank you for putting so much effort into learning about heat pumps so that you can provide value to people who come to us for information. We all appreciate your work, and for pulling together the program that Abode and Mike Simons are going to be part of. Some of these questions are going to be maybe for Loie, but probably for Mike. So gear up. First of all, I want to address something I do know about, which is that there have been some comments in the chat about whether or not heat pumps reduce greenhouse gas emissions relative to natural gas. And for the record, our organization absolutely says that's true. That is the science that is established by the US EPA, the US Department of Energy, the Massachusetts Office of Environmental Affairs. Every pathway towards reducing carbon emissions in the United States and Massachusetts has heat pumps in the mix. And according to the Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plan, we need about 1 million heat pumps by 2030 to get to the state's requirement of 50% carbon reduction by 2030. In a given home, it reduces your carbon footprint by about 2/3. That's if you have electricity that would normally come from, say, National Grid or Eversource. And the electricity is getting cleaner every year because of state requirements, the renewable portfolio standard. So if you have a heat pump today, it's even going to be more beneficial 10 years from now when the electricity mix is cleaner. But as already been said in the chat, a lot of people are buying 100% green electricity coming from wind and solar. They can have zero emission home heating, just like they can have a zero emission car. And the best mix of all is when you have solar panels on your roof and you can manage it that way. So I just want to put that issue aside and now get into the technical issues of how one can put heat pumps on your home if possible. So let's see, question, Mike. Someone asked just how about hot water? It's great to have heat pumps for space heat, but how about just to reduce the hot water load in a home?
Yeah, well, Loie talked about it. So there's a few different solutions. So standalone package heat pump hot water heater that is kind of stealing energy from the basement, transferring that into the domestic hot water and spitting out cool, which for half of the year is unfavorable, but dry for most homes is wildly favorable all year into the basement. Do you know that the air to water heat pumps that the marketplace isn't yet developed fully for in our particular market, though the technology is, that can also be used for domestic hot water as well. So if like space for stealing heat from the basement is extremely unfavorable, you could be working with a plumber to be pursuing a standard air to water split system, and that could be a solution. Or the other carbon-free solution that often gets overlooked is solar thermal or solar domestic hot water. So a handful of options there.
Thank you, Mike. And I do know that in the Mass Save program, they consider heat pump water heaters to be highly cost effective in most cases, especially if you have oil or electric resistance for the hot water. Common question, if what's really driving 2022 is the Mass Save rebates are going to be so generous. Again, what's your knowledge about the requirement of getting an energy assessment before going ahead with the heat pump install? Do you know if that's a requirement?
Yeah, so not only is it a requirement, but if there is any weatherization or insulation and air sealing measures that the energy specialist makes, those are going to need to be executed on as part of the project to receive the $10,000 rebate. The good news with the Mass Save program, if people are unfamiliar, air sealing work is 100% subsidized and installation work is subsidized by 75% of the cost. The Mass Save program is picking up the tab on that. You're responsible for 25%, but there's no cap to that amount. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that for moderate income residents as well as renters, the incentive does jump up to 90% or 100% of the cost.
And some people may have had a Mass Save assessment recently, though. That probably would qualify, and they'll probably accept a date of something fairly recent, right?
Yeah, as long as if you had an audit recently and on the like heat loan form, they check the box that says like no weatherization measures, then there's not going to be any hiccups moving through the rebate process.
Okay. On the whole house rebate, which they're really trying to dangle $10,000 in front of people, what about people who have a home that's partially heated by heat pumps and they want to make it entirely heated by heat pumps? Do you know how the rebate and incentives would work for that?
Yeah, I think that with how the program's designed, if there's already cold climate heat pumps that are being actively used, that would be outside of the scope of the $10,000 rebate. However, that $1,250 per ton may be eligible in that case. So yeah, I would certainly before assuming that you would be getting the rebate, I would just be sending over the proposal to like hvac@masssave.com and just making sure that you are going to be entitled to what you think that what your contractor may be telling you to. So I would just try to get a level of pre-approval from Mass Save before expecting it.
Okay. So here's a question that has to do with the program that we're launching kind of beginning tonight with Green Energy Consumers and Abode. We've done two programs where limited time where people could join a buying group for heat pumps, and Lowy managed those. They went very well. But this year we're going to do it a little bit differently, which is we're going to have a number of contractors that people can get bids from, and we're hiring Abode to help answer questions that people might have about how to compare different bids for heat pumps. Lowy is wicked smart, but we're going to depend upon Abode for some technical advice. And Lowy's going to manage the whole game. But so the question would be, what if should somebody go to Abode before getting bids so they can get a design that says this is exactly what I want, or should somebody get bids and then take them to Abode for $50 or $100 and get the good advice? Lowy or Mike or both? You want to answer that?
I'd say either way is fine. It really depends on your level of comfort with talking to the installers. If you feel like, boy, these installers are going to eat me alive, I don't understand the process, I don't even understand what my options are, I feel I need to be better prepared, then yes, Abode would be a great option and would really be able to talk you through your home and the options for your home. So then you go to the installers and say, this is kind of what I'm interested in. But you can also do it the other way, get your quotes, and then come back to Abode and say, one person wants to put in 3 compressors, the other person wants to put in 1 compressor and 3 heads. What's the difference between the two? Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, so there's certainly benefits with both. I would say that if all that you want to do with the project is get 3 quotes and pick one and move forward, then I would certainly be starting with reaching out to Abode. If you do have time in your life, you do like to meet with HVAC contractors, I actually prefer meeting with people when they at least have 1 quote or 2 quotes, just because it's like then like we're doing everything virtually and there's definitely some drawbacks of that, but at least like hearing like 1 quote or 2 quote, then I kind of have some like real world examples of like, oh, this type of equipment is only going to be heating your home to around 20 degrees. But if you did opt for, say, putting a HZ at the end of that particular model, now it's hyperheat. Now this is going to give you coverage down to -5 degrees. So it is sometimes helpful with going into the consultations that the customer may not be at a 101 level, at a 201 level, but there's other ways to get up to that, you know, having a more than a baseline knowledge of heat pumps other than meeting with HVAC contractors. So either or.
Yeah. Now, folks, a lot of questions are coming in, and we're going to try to address general questions. We just don't have the time to answer 150 home specific questions. that's why we're trying to set up the program. So Loie, we're going to send out an email to people after this who registered, even if they didn't attend tonight, with the recording and with more material, and we'll answer more questions that were in the chat. But we're also going to have a landing page link, correct? Tell us about, we're going to set up a special page for anybody who wants to sign on to the program and then to be contacting either Loie or Abode. Can you tell us more about that? You're muted, Loie.
There's the URL, either info.greenenergyconsumers.org/abode or simply greenenergyconsumers.org/abode, and you'll be able to fill out a very short form. Basically, the only thing we need is your email, but as much of the other few questions as you can fill out, and that will allow us to get you the more detailed information as it becomes available to us, as soon as the installer list is available, etc. And there is a co-branded site on the Abode platform as well, and we'll be linking to that from this URL. Okay,
so the program's still in the early stages. It will evolve, but right now you can get information by that link that's shown right now. So again, general questions. Do the incentives apply to condos? And they do. You just have to work it out with your condo colleagues, correct?
Yeah, you would need to talk with the condo about where to locate the condenser outside. If it's not going to be on your private porch, say, if it's going to be somewhere in the yard, you'd need to work that out with your condo. And if there was any, whatever electrical, conduit stuff needed to be done on the outside, you'd need to talk with them about that. But yep, you could apply for that whole home incentive just for your condo itself.
One person asked an interesting question. Is the program we're doing with Abode similar to the program that we have with Energy Sage, which we do with rooftop solar? And a few years ago, we started partnering with this company called Energy Sage. And if you go to our website, you can click on it, learn about it, go to our website, look for the solar page. And what Energy Sage does is they help you evaluate bids from up to 7 competing solar contractors. And it works really well. The customer satisfaction for that program is very high. People get a good price for the solar. Abode is, I don't know if Mike would put it this way. I think Abode is on the leading edge on heat pumps of trying to create the most objective and practical way for people to compare multiple bids and to get, really what's important here is Abode is not going to benefit whether you pick contractor X or Y. They're going to help you figure it out and give you the service that you need. So I would say they're comparable. Mike, would you say so?
Yeah, I think we're with Energy Sage, in some ways they're very much a tech company that's doing solar, while I think we're a home performance or a building science company doing heat pumps. So I think at like our DNA, it is slightly different, but both of our hearts are in good places.
Yeah, very good. Let's see, another question would be, to get the whole house incentive that they're talking about, up to $10,000, do you have to absolutely disconnect the old system, the oil or gas system? And do you have to put it on the front lawn?
Yeah, no, so there is a sign-off form that needs to get submitted, and there's a few check boxes, and you need to check one. So option number 1 is that it's been removed. Option number 2, that it's disconnected. And option number 3, that it's being left in place for only emergency use. The emergency use also does allow you to continue to use it for domestic hot water. So if you do have a tankless coil inside of your boiler, if you do have an indirect storage tank, you don't need to be junking that perfectly good, what some people believe, domestic hot water equipment to switch over to air source heat pumps. The other thing that's just not talked about, and I did see a little bit in the chat, is, well, what happens on a freezing cold day? So with the whole home heat pumps, freezing cold days, this signing off on this form means that the equipment is designed for freezing cold days. What none of the equipment is designed for is a polar vortex, is negative 15 degrees, negative 20 degrees for hours or days on end. So that for some people could provide a lot of peace of mind knowing that they do have a traditional fossil fuel-based system in the basement. But I am happy to have discussions about how to design for these extreme weather events that may not need you to be maintaining a $10,000 or a $15,000 boiler or furnace and thinking that you're always going to need to be replacing that every 15 or 30 years as well. Yeah.
Thanks. One person says in the chat, I'm scared of installers, that it's not fun and they're very expensive. And all I can say is what we're trying to do here with Abode is Loie and Mike are going to try to tame the installers and give you the support you need. No one's forcing you to buy these heat pumps. We're trying to just present the best options for you, and go into this with your eyes wide open, do some research, and remember that you have Abode and Loie to help you out as you go. Let's see. One question was, do you have an idea, ballpark, the difference in cost between central air conditioning and a heat pump that provides both heat and air conditioning?
Yeah, and I can say this. So if you're going around, and it does depend on where you are in the state, but say if you're inside of the 495 belt, maybe you'll be able to find someone to replace a central AC with a new single stage central AC for $10,000. Like that still may exist somewhere in the Massachusetts marketplace from a full service shop. A sole proprietor who owns a pickup truck who's, you know, doing this after his regular full-time job, maybe that could be coming in at $8,000. But traditionally, for say like a multi-stage central AC versus a cold climate heat pump, there's not a huge price disparity between those. I typically see both of those coming in, you know, somewhere right around $15,000 kind of as a starting point. And then depending on, you know, bells and whistles with how thick of a MERV filter you want, air purification, you know, then those jobs can easily go up to $20,000, $25,000 for a single indoor unit or a single heat pump system ducted. So yeah, there's a lot of, there's certainly a lot to be considering with kind of cost, but I can say for my own home, and I didn't get a special deal, I have a 2,800 square foot home. My heat pump project cost $22,000. So it is real money, but do know that with that mass save incentive of $10,000, if I was eligible for it, if I waited a few months and did it, then my project would have cost $12,000. And good luck finding someone putting in a new gas-fired boiler, an oil-fired boiler inside the 495 belt for $12,000. So it can certainly be extremely comparable or more comparable than just putting in a new fossil fuel-based system.
And I want to reinforce there that the single expenditure on a heat pump provides the opportunity to replace potentially two pieces of equipment that could each be multi-$1,000s. So the fact that a heat pump provides heating and cooling is a real big money saver if you do currently have central AC and a fossil fuel heating system.
Again, we have a ton of questions coming in. I'm going to just do the general questions. Mike can't be the house doctor for every individual person here. But here's a general question that's important. Could we just one more time clarify, if someone wants to sign up for the quote comparison, how does that clarify what that means versus the full design? If someone asked the question, said, if we get the design, do we then go out and shop that design, but need to get the quote comparison to sort out the vendors?
Yeah, the quote comparison is really helpful when you do have, say, three quotes, and you're just trying to figure out like, how does this all ductless system compare to my other installer who's recommending ductless and ducted versus this other installer who's recommending dual fuel? So it can kind of really do an apples to oranges as far as like, what is the cost per ton? What is kind of the range, like the acceptable range of like what my heat load is, and how does these three different heat pump systems line up? So it's just hard. So the tricky thing about heat pumps in Massachusetts is there's nothing on the proposal that says how the equipment's actually going to work. This is somewhat illuminating with showing, you know, that, oh, this type of equipment is going to maintain 100% of its capacity, or, oh, this equipment is 200% oversized for what my home actually needs. So it's when you are just like, you know, you want to do it, you don't know who you're wanting to work with, you don't know how the equipment's going to be performing. That's when a quote comparison could be really helpful. Do know that as far as the booking goes and like the scheduling, if you like sign up for just a general consultation and you have quotes, I'm more than happy to give you screen sharing power, or set up a screen share. You email it to me, I pull up the screen share, then we dive into the submittals, and then we can also work through the proposals in person. So yeah, it's just for maybe like two different target audiences. I think like if you do like specs and data, just the quote comparison may be able to be what you're needing. But if you do really want to like talk through a somewhat major investment, at least in my mind, then I would opt more for the consultation.
And I got to tell you, folks, either one is a bargain. To think about spending several $1,000s to pay them $50 or $100 to get good advice, I think is pretty good. And the reason we're able to do that is because we have over 300 people registering for this event. It's all group purchasing power, and that's hopefully how it works. A couple of Mass Save questions. Will the Mass Save incentives to convert from oil to gas or from gas to high efficiency gas go away? I'll bet you that they will be gone in 3 years or less. They were almost extinguished this year, but I think that will come back and eventually they'll be gone. So if you are looking to upgrade your oil or gas system to a higher efficiency one, you ought to think about that, because the incentives won't be around forever for that, because the state is pretty committed to the transition to providing incentives to heat pumps. They're not saying you couldn't. There's no proposal that I'm aware that says that you won't be able to install gas or oil, replace your system with gas or oil, but you just may not get a Mass Save incentive after some date. And somebody said Mass Save audit was 3 years ago. Is that recent enough? Somebody answered, needs to be under 12 months. I think that's true. I think it probably doesn't need to be done within 12 months. How long do heat pumps and mini split systems last, Mike? How long? When would you have to replace one?
Yeah, there's some that are still out there that have the same design aesthetic as a wood paneled station wagon. So sometimes things last ages and ages, but as far as just, I think like setting the right expectation, the same way that maybe you would plan on replacing your roof after 20 years, I would be thinking that 15 to 20 years is really the lifespan of the system. Most of the equipment, if it is going through like a certified installer, the warranty on outdoor equipment, indoor equipment is either 10 or 12 years, depending on the vendor. But yeah, I think 15 years is the safe expectation. And that's also the expectation that any plumber, HVAC person should be getting for a condensing boiler, condensing furnace, and on-demand hot water heater. So just the days of steel, cast iron, HVAC equipment that is last, 50 to 100 years, those days are behind us.
Yeah. Sally points out that we have people who are looking to make these heat pump installations probably will be able to look at Mass Save's heat loan program, where you can get zero interest financing, and where the Mass Save is partnering up with banks. Lots of banks will offer that heat loan.
Yes, and I'll note that even if you've received a heat loan in the past, the Mass Save incentives, the change in Mass Save this year reopens the possibility of getting a second heat loan if you're switching to heat pumps.
Right. Good questions. Someone asked, will the vendors, in order to get the Mass Save rebate, will the vendors will have to be, installers will have to be on the Mass Save list, correct?
In 2022, no, except if they're doing ducted equipment. So if there is, let's say that your plumber who you love, who's been maintaining your steam boiler for the last 20 years, and he's like, I see the times are changing, I want to do heat pumps. That professional is more than welcome to install your heat pump system. Going into 2023, Mass Save is going to have a list of contractors that you'll need to be working with that will have attended X, Y, and Z training. Right now, that the only training that needs to be attended is for the proper commissioning of ducted mini splits or centrally ducted heat pumps.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, you cannot buy your own equipment and install it yourself. It does have to be a licensed HVAC person who installs your system in order to qualify for the rebate.
Yep. One question, does the system design consultation include tests for absence of insulation and other things, or should we get an audit before the system design consultation? And I think the answer is Abode will do an excellent job helping you figure out the heat pumps, but you'll need to get the assessment from a Mass Save vendor before that, right? Mike?
Yeah, yes, you got it. Yeah, all of the consultations are remote and I don't have X-ray Zoom vision. So, yep, so take full advantage of the Mass Save program. Yeah, and if there's any hiccups with it and you don't feel like that the person coming out was well represented, the company that I work for, our main kind of business line is oversee the auditors in the program. So I guess having a consultation could also involve making sure that you have a stellar energy audit experience.
Yeah. And let's see. I think we're getting close to the end. There's some discussion about not just insulation, but also getting air sealing, and that's true. That's the reducing leakages in the home. It's 8:30. I think that was a very fast-paced hour. I know we didn't answer all the questions, but we did our best given the time. Loie, fabulous, thank you. Mike, thank you very much. And thank you for all the people who asked good questions. We will do our best to answer them in the coming days. There's going to be a lot on our website. You're going to learn a lot by going to Abode's website as well. And look for the email from us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll be posting this to our YouTube site as well as sending you the link. So, thanks so much for being here.
My name is Devin DeLibero, and I am a program coordinator at Green Energy Consumers, and I work on the Drive Green program. And I have some staff with me here to help monitor the chat today. But before I do introduce them, I'll just let you know the chats are going to be recorded. We will have 2 different breakout groups. So if you participated in one, you can always go back and watch the other one when I send the follow-up email. But other than that, it's pretty laid back to just ask your questions as you have them and try to be respectful of other people who want to ask questions. But other than that, I will let my staff introduce themselves, starting with Anna.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna. I am the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And for those of you who might not be familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to speed the transition to a low carbon future, which we do through advocacy work, but also programs like our Drive Green program that helps people learn more about electric cars and access them. So that is the sort of program home for events like this. And I'm really glad you can all join us today, and I'll pass it over to Mal.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mal Skowron. I'm the Transportation Policy and Program Coordinator at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. So I do a little bit of our program work, mostly developing our educational resources for EVs, a big part of all the different resources that you have on the website. I help to keep updated and I also lead our policy work in Rhode Island related to electric vehicles. And just a little bit, I have an action alert for those of you who live in Rhode Island. But for now, I will let Adriana introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Adriana. I work on the Drive Green team, and I also work on the marketing communications team. I send out all of the emails, I work on the events, and I also answer any customer service questions that come through our customer service chat.
Okay, so now you've gotten to meet us a little bit. Before we go into breakout groups, I'm going to have Mal just give her call to action for those Rhode Islanders on the call.
Thanks, Devin. Yeah, so for folks that have been familiar with Green Energy Consumers for a long time, you know that we do education work to help people learn about the benefits of electric vehicles, but that there are lots of key policies in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island that need to be enacted in order to continue to help address some of the largest barriers that people face when they're considering an electric vehicle. So very often we hear people talk about how there's not enough charging infrastructure to support them in the transition to an electric vehicle, and that they're concerned because the upfront costs make driving an EV unaffordable to them. And so we see a really clear need for policy to be able to fill in those gaps so that we can advance EV adoption, make EVs accessible to everyone, and make sure that electric vehicles can be a tool to help both states meet their climate goals, which are binding and mandatory and absolutely need to happen for us to avoid the worst of the climate crisis. So on the advocacy side, in Massachusetts, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, there was a big Senate bill that established a lot of key planning principles to help Massachusetts do its planning for electric vehicle adoption. And we're happy to report that in Rhode Island, we have a very similar bill being heard today in the House Finance Committee called the Electric Transportation Act. This bill would be a very useful, critical tool for Rhode Island to continue to support people to make the switch to an electric vehicle. So it establishes a lot of the planning that Rhode Island needs to do in order to help people access charging, be able to afford EVs. It helps get our electrical grid ready to make sure that we can support all the EVs that are coming, and establishes key to-dos across the state to make sure that we're electrifying vehicles in the state fleet as well. So it's an important bill that I think has an impact on you, whether you're already driving an EV and want to see more charging infrastructure, or if you're thinking about it and need supportive policy to help get you there. So in just a moment, I'm going to drop a little set of instructions in the chat for how you can submit testimony to the House Finance Committee to make sure that this bill moves forward. And this is an action alert only for Rhode Islanders. So Massachusetts folks, sorry about that, but don't worry, if you want to get engaged on policy, you'll have ample opportunities to do so in the coming weeks. So follow our blog to stay updated on that if you're interested. But I'm just gonna drop this into the chat. And now I will open breakout rooms. So you should see a little box pop up that indicates you can enter the breakout room, and go ahead and do so once you see it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this breakout room. We'll wait just a moment to see if there's any other folks still joining audio. Harold, it looks like you've been rotated 90 degrees since the main session.
Really? Oh my gosh. Let me see if I can correct that here. I'm going to go off video for just a sec then.
Okay, it looks like everybody can hopefully hear me by now. So welcome to this breakout room. We have a whole bunch of EV owners today, so we'll start by just asking those of you who already drive electric to briefly introduce yourself with your name, where you live, what car you drive, and how long you've had it, and like your top favorite thing about your car, and then we'll move straight to questions. So if you would like to ask a question, you can either use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand and ask it live, or if you prefer, you can write it in the chat and Adriana or I will read those out loud. So the top left of my screen is Mike. So Mike, if you want to start us off with an intro and then pass it on to one of the other EV owners on the call, that would be great.
All right, so Mike Duclos, I bought my Chevy Bolt in 2019, February, new, and about 35,000 miles on it so far. I enjoy bicycling, and so have a bicycle rack and go places like Acadia National Park, Northeast Kingdom, and other places. How about Harold?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Oops, am I on? Yes. Let's see. We've been driving electric since 2013, way before superchargers were in our area. And we currently have a 2017 Tesla Model S. It has about 125,000 miles on it. And we're planning a long trip pretty soon, probably next month, to go down to Florida or maybe somewhere else, somewhere. Let's see, let's do, how about, is it Michael, I think, next?
Yeah, I'm Michael Fauner. I've been driving with 2 electric vehicles, one at a time, of course, since 2017. And currently have a Bolt EUV, and just love the car. It's a real upgrade from my old Bolt. And we don't plan a whole lot of long trips right now. Probably will be during the summer, maybe at some point. And let's pass this to Jacqueline, maybe.
Hi, I'm a ringer here. I don't have any cars, but I don't have any cars at all. But I work, I'm a volunteer with the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay and the Boston Clean Energy Coalition. So we are having a series of neighbor-to-neighbor meetings monthly to try to figure out how we can get charging stations available. And many people say that they're in our responses, participants in our neighbor-to-neighbor events say they're trying to decide what kind of car to buy and how people like it. So I'm eager to hear from all of you and spread the word. How about Russell?
Yeah, hi, I don't have an EV car. I live out here in the Berkshires. I'm interested in finding something that's 4-wheel drive. We live up on the side of Mount Greylock, and my neighbor across the street has a Bolt, but when it snows a lot, she's asked to borrow our 4-wheel drive Subaru because she's not sure she can get home. So I keep hearing stories about that Subaru's coming out with an EV 4-wheeler, but I haven't seen, when I ask the people at Subaru, they have no idea. And but that's what I'm looking for, is something that's not outrageously expensive, but is 4-wheel drive. So any help I would love to hear.
We have a couple of folks that I'm sure can speak to that. I see Tina is on with a Bolt, and then I see 2 folks with a Mach-E. So if we could just, run through those intros real quick, then we can get to the question of all-wheel drive.
Yeah, I can go. So my name's Eric. I'm actually on my 3rd EV. I had a 2013 Leaf. I had a 2020 Bolt that then we had the recall situation. And now I'm in a Mach-E all-wheel drive. Bought it last month. So happy to talk more about that one later. Love the car. I think the price point on those, you can get an all-wheel drive Mach-E for $47,000 before rebates, and that brings it down to $37,000 after the state and federal. There's also, I wrote in the chat, there's also an Ioniq all-wheel drive, an EV6 from Kia, and they're all kind of similar price points. The Subaru, I think, comes out next year, the Solterra.
I can go with my Mach-E also. Hi, I'm Jerry. I bought it in July last summer, and I've been really liking it. It's fun to drive. It looks nice. You know, I get a lot of comments on the way the car looks, and it's pretty comfortable. We drove maybe a couple other cars, and of course, the problem is getting availability on the cars is really tough now. They're not even taking any more new orders for 2022 model year. So I was pretty lucky I have the car. happy to answer questions.
Hi, I'm Tina. I live in Sharon, Mass, and near Boston. And right before COVID hit, I got a really great 2020 Bolt at an amazing price because of all the different rebates that I learned about from this organization and other places. But at any rate, then I didn't drive it much, and then all of a sudden it was failing, and I had a hard time grasping what was going on, but it had almost like a grand mal seizure and got bumped to the top of the line for a new battery. And now it's just the most fantastic car you could ever want, in my opinion. And I've got 8 years to just be in it, but I am looking to see what will be next, because I think the future is it's just to be embraced. It's so much fun to drive. And right now with gas prices, I'm sorry, but it's hard not to smirk when I drive by the gas station. So.
Are there any EV owners we missed?
Yeah, I don't have the picture up, but this is Jessica. I have a Tesla Model X, bought new 2016, our first new car ever bought and only. We use it to do all sorts of things. We used to tow our camper to campgrounds, enjoy the outdoors. It does everything we could possibly want. And then a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, I needed a second car for commuting, and I could not imagine buying another car with a gas engine in it. So I ended up getting a Fiat 500e, which is actually no longer available in the US, but except used, and you could probably find one somewhere. But it's just a little car to get around town, not a lot of range, but it's just another option that we like. And we considered getting rid of it because I no longer have that commute, but it's I would have a hard time trying to replace it at this point with the lack of cars available. So we just decided to keep it. So I can answer questions about either of them.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, go ahead.
My name's Shelley Warren.
Camera.
Oh, my camera's not working. I have a 2017 Chevy Bolt that has, 39,000 miles on it. And I just got a new battery, and I'm running over 300 miles of range now. So I'm really, really happy.
300.
That's it.
Nice to meet you. I feel like every time we do one of these, there are more EV owners that pop up, and I will send you all a link to sign up to be an official EV ambassador soon.
Great.
But I want to open up the floor to questions. I know we had one about all-wheel drive. Whoever asked that, did you get enough of an answer, or do you have follow-up questions about all-wheel drive?
I did get some information. Someone said that the Subaru Sultana is coming out next year, but it has a small range. So there's just a lot to look at this point. Our problem is where we live up here in the mountain, we live in an old house, so we can't put solar on our roof. So it's a matter of paying for the electricity, as well as, not having to pay for gasoline at $5 a gallon. It's nice. So.
I have another answer for that question for your all-wheel drive. The Tesla Model S, the Model Y, and the Model X are all all-wheel drive cars. And I'm not sure where you live as far as your snow is concerned, but there probably is somebody in your neighborhood that has a Tesla or has an electric vehicle, and they've probably driven it in the snow, and you can sort of ask them about, hey, how does this handle in the snow? But if you're just going by all-wheel drive, Tesla has all-wheel drive cars, and as the other people have said, the Mach-E has an all-wheel drive version, and there are other all-wheel drive version EV. It's just a matter of what your snow and elevation and angle situation is, I guess.
Yeah, Harold, we live up on the side of Mount Greylock, so we get about as much snow as anywhere in Massachusetts on a regular basis. Our next door neighbor has a EV car, and when there's a lot of snow, she borrows her husband's four-wheel drive gas power or ours, because she's concerned about how low it is to the ground, but also whether she's going to get back home at the end of the day with her Bolt, I guess it is she has.
We have a whole page, if you're interested, about winter driving in general that has some tips and tricks. And one thing we like to point to is that the country with the highest rate of EV adoption is Norway, and they get a lot of snow. But we also have a Facebook group that if you're interested, you want to join, you can pose questions like that, and maybe somebody in there lives on the other side of Mount Greylock and can answer more specific questions about that.
Okay, thanks.
This is Harold. I have a question for Jessica, I believe, who has the Fiat 500e. Is it okay to ask that question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so you've had it for how long?
We've had it since June, July of 2019.
Okay, good. And besides, rotating tires, have you had to do anything else to it? And if so, how did the local Fiat dealership react to you?
There was one place within maybe 50 miles of me. I live in Brookline. They were in Norwood, which, for me is, it's surely within the range of the EV. That's one consideration. You probably don't want to have your nearest dealer out of your range. That would be very inconvenient. So basically we had one problem. Fortunately, it was under warranty at the time. And they had to basically replace wiring in the car. That's essentially the only time I've had it in service, other than just to get tires rotated and normal wear items, I would say, so anything related with the tire suspension, that sort of stuff. So, yes, you do have to be a little careful. It's not, sometimes the service took a while because there weren't a lot of expertise on that car, especially on the East Coast. This is a car that was leased in California, I think, and maybe Oregon, maybe Washington. It's West Coast. And then Fiat, they only leased them. So once those leases were up, they went on the used car market. And that's typically how one would achieve one of those cars on the West Coast, had it shipped over across the country. You might just find one near you. And I would definitely look into what your local service, just ask, do you service this car?
I'll jump in to say that the Fiat 500e is a really special case because, to my knowledge, that was actually never sold new on the East Coast. So when you find one used, Fiat dealerships are kind of like, oh, what is this? I've never seen one of these before, which is not the case if you're getting a Mach-E or a Bolt or a Leaf or one of those other vehicles. So that's a more unique experience. But oh wait, sorry, Jessica, did you want to say anything else?
Was that answer your question, or do you have anything else you want me to answer?
Thanks, that answered my question.
Okay.
I saw one question in the chat about battery replacements. And I'm wondering if any of our EV folks want to respond to that. If not, I can, but I'd rather hear it from you.
What's the question? Is it about?
The question is, what is the cost to replace the battery? My understanding is the warranty is for 8 years, 100,000 miles, whichever comes first.
Yeah, I would say, I haven't obviously replaced a battery, but when I sold my 2013 Leaf, which that didn't have battery cooling or heating, so it had the highest degradation, shortest life. It was 8 years old with 85,000 miles, and it had lost 6% of its capacity. I checked it with a port scanner. So, I don't think it's a common thing to have to replace batteries. And I think that warranty is pretty big. The warranty is bigger than any drivetrain. Well, it's matches like a Kia and Hyundai on an engine. So it's not something they anticipate failing.
So this is Mike. I've had the battery replaced in my Bolt. It had about 30,000 miles on it. It was free. The reason is there was a defect in these batteries and GM decided just to change them all. Mine seemed to work all right. I guess it's an it depends situation. I've got a question for Harold. Harold, you've got a high mileage car there. What's your battery degradation like?
It's probably gone down maybe 4 to 5% from when we got it new. But that really, it has so much mileage or range that you don't really worry too much about that. You just basically, when you do a long trip, you go from one supercharger to the next supercharger, and they're conveniently located anywhere from like 100 to 150 miles, which is way within the range. You just have to, think about what you're doing, not be a lead foot type of person when you're driving, and your trip is very nice. Almost like what happened with Ginger Z on Good Morning America. She went from New York to Detroit, and from Detroit down to Miami this past week for Earth Week, and had no issues.
It looked like you were about to say something, so
I don't know if it's just a curiosity to me, but I heard that this is for Harold, I suppose, or other Tesla, but the idea that your heat in the cabin is like a pump, so that you're not really taking your miles down too significantly. You want a cozy, warm cabin in the cooler months. Is that true with the Teslas? Is that a satisfactory thing? Because in the Chevy Bolt, my daughter gives me the hairy eyeball because I make her freeze, essentially, because I don't like to see it happen. Even if I know I don't need every mile, it just feels weird.
So with the new Teslas, they have like the Model Y, the new Model S, Model Y, and the Model 3s. They do have a heat pump that makes it more efficient to heat up the car.
Yeah.
We have a 2017. We do not have a heat pump, but we use the heat, especially when my wife is in the car. We use the heat, and we have no problem.
Nice.
And just to add to that electric cars also have supplemental heating you might not be aware of. Some people might not be aware of. One is the heated steering wheel, which is actually very nice.
Very nice.
It actually is a great improvement over a cold steering wheel. And the second is the heated seats. In moderate weather, not very cold weather, I find they actually do quite a good job at keeping you very comfortable. So you can manage your battery that way. Plus, you can always turn the heat on and draw a little bit more from the battery, the cabin heat in the car. But I find those two things, the heated steering wheel and the heated seat, to be very nice comfort features.
I agree.
My experience with the energy usage is the outside temperature is much, much more significant than the use of the internal heat. That does draw a few percent, but I've experienced significant range loss, like as the temperature drops below 50, and again when it gets down into like say the 30s, it definitely takes quite a hit. So that is a consideration if you do a lot of winter driving over distance. I do all just like commuting and local driving so far. I've never tried to take a trip. The charging infrastructure, for Tesla is a lot different than it is for everybody else. So that's my take on using the heat. I don't mind using the heat or the AC. It's fine.
There are some tricks you can use to do this. For example, most of us probably have a charger at home. So you can preheat the car before you leave, and that is coming from the wall outlet. So that doesn't touch your battery. And that preheating takes a fair bit because the cabin is cold, and so if you do that, you can get yourself some extra range, at least starting out.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I know that GM is coming out with heat pumps for all their electrics. And so that's something we can all look forward to. If you don't have a car with heated seats and heated steering wheel, I kind of liken that to having a day-night mirror now, because it's if you got an electric car, why don't you have that, and I use it all the time in the winter, and I don't have any issues. I seldom turn on my heat because I find the seat heat and the steering wheel heat does the job.
The next question in the chat, there are a couple of questions around the the Tesla full self-driving and the autonomous driving features on the Bolt. And then I also believe the Mach-E has some. So those of you who drive those cars, do you have any anecdotes to share?
So for the Tesla full self-driving, with the basic car, it has autopilot, which is basically a fancy keep you in the lane, keep your distance from the front car, which is a great thing on a trip because you don't have to work as hard. You just have to pay attention and keep your hands on the wheel. You can also have what they call as a full self-driving, where the car will actually make some decisions where you set speed, and if the cars in front of you are going slower than that speed and there's an open lane by you, the car itself will change lanes and get you from point A to point B. I personally do that every once in a while, but I like I'm a little old school, so I like a little bit more control. Even though I have a full self-driving capability in my car, I don't use it a lot, but I use just one step under there, which makes the trips great. Like I said, we have 125,000 miles on it. Most of those miles, if we're on the highway, have been with Tesla Autopilot. I use it probably 90% when I'm on a trip on the highway, and it's great. It makes you feel you're not as tired when you get to your destination. Hopefully that answered part of the question.
I saw somebody wrote about the, oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I know GM has Super Cruise, and the Bolt EUV can be equipped with Super Cruise. I chose not to have it because, frankly, I didn't think I would use it enough to, use it and justify the expense of it. I find that the standard cruise and the safety issues as far as following distance and staying between the lanes, that's already inherent in the car. So the only thing that Super Cruise is really doing for you is extending that just a little bit. And I didn't find that it was really all that necessary.
Yeah, I would say the Mach-E is similar to the others. It, it varies your speed, keeps you in the center of the lane. When I have it on, I do notice I can drive slightly straighter than it can, but it's still pretty good. It's a little hairy the first time you use it. It's scary when you're approaching corners on the highway at like 75 miles an hour, but the car zips beautifully around them. Even at night in the rain, I used it. I don't use it around town just because of like pedestrians, bicycles. There's too many other variables that I don't want to use that sort of system. And it takes updates. So the Mach-E only does keeps you in your lane, keeps you going the speed you want to be going, relative to other cars. But I think we're scheduled for this fall to get lane changing, and it'll be blinker based. So you'll tap your blinker and then the car will lane change itself and then put it back. And then I think another update that's scheduled for it is the navigation based around town autonomous driving, which, when that comes, I'll test it and see if I like it. But I like the Mach-E piece because you can completely remove your hands from the steering wheel. So if it's an approved highway, which all of them are in New England, when it's active, you can just take your hands completely off and rest them. It just has a camera that watches your face. So if you don't look at the road every 30 seconds, it pings you to do so.
Go ahead, Tina.
Does anyone in this group or anyone, I'd like to think about how we can make these vehicles more affordable. So not the super fancy stuff, sorry, and no offense, I love that too, but I want to see my children have them and their kids ultimately have them. And so that's why I chose the Bolt. I think of it as like the people's car. So who else thinks about that, or who else works on that, or how can I help as a citizen who wants to support the cause? That's my question.
Well, I think one thing is that you really need to consider the total cost of ownership. Like MIT has done a really nice interactive tool, I think it's carboncounter.com, that lets you put up all kinds of cars, hybrids, internal combustion engine, electricity only, on a graph, and you can look at the cost per mile. Because one thing people don't realize is that the maintenance on these cars is just about nil. For example, the maintenance schedule on the Bolt is every 7,500 miles, rotate the tires, every 15,000 miles, change the cabin air filter, at 140,000 miles, you change the coolant. So you have to put tires on it, right? You have to put wiper blades on it, but there are a lot of common maintenance items that just go away. That plus the much lower cost of fuel are two things that people don't consider. They look at first cost and say, this is shocking, right? What it really is about is a little bit more financing. That finance charge gets paid back by the savings you experience in fuel costs and maintenance. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, it comes at a time when everything's very expensive and everything's hard to get. And so I just want to, it's easy for someone in my generation to think this way. You know, it's exciting to have these vehicles, but I would like to see more low cost ones. So I hope.
Well, I think you can get a new something or other, you know, a 250-mile EV. I'm not sure which, through the Green Energy Consumer Alliance. If you look on their website, the Drive Green program, you'll see some cars that with the incentives are about $20,000. So that's getting to a range. And if you consider then the lower maintenance and the fuel costs, you're really saving money. You just have to get over the, you know, the sticker shock thing.
I'll jump in here real quick, if that's okay, from the perspective of our organization, because this is why we started the Drive Green program. Was we tried to aggregate consumers, approach dealers and say, offer us discounts so that we can send you leads and make these vehicles more accessible. As an individual and even as a state-based organizations, there's limited things that we can do, but most of them are on the policy side. So ultimately, what we have to do is wait for the manufacturers to build these at scale, take advantage of economies of scale, particularly on batteries, to bring down the costs. But there are a lot of interventions that we're pushing our states to take on to make these vehicles more accessible. So I could talk about this for an hour, but I'll just run off real quick. First of all, we need used vehicles to be available. We recently did a search for how many used EVs are available within, I think, 100 miles of Providence, and there were 12, and 2 of them were in the state of Rhode Island. So first, we need a lot more new cars to make a lot more used cars available. We need states to offer effective and equitable incentives, purchase incentives for EVs. So Massachusetts has a More EV program. The state Senate in Massachusetts just passed a climate bill that would make the rebate bigger, make it point of sale, which is key, extend it to used vehicles, which is key. And an amendment was filed to add an adder for low and moderate income drivers. So that is something that we're going to be working on for the for the rest of the session.
And let me know how I can help.
Subscribe to our blog. We're literally today posting a blog that summarizes both what's happening in Massachusetts generally and then specific on this transportation piece. But in addition to all that, Rhode Island is bringing back a state rebate. Very briefly, right now they're asking for feedback on their program design. So that's something that we'll be doing. And then in both states, our electric utilities have a really big role to play in making sure that charging infrastructure is built out. So in Massachusetts, we've been intervening in big dockets where the utilities are proposing to the Department of Public Utilities what they want to do for the next 3 years. So we've been saying, build charging, build a lot of it everywhere, please. There was a third thing that I wanted to mention, and it is escaping me, but federally, there's a lot of stuff that can happen in terms of coordinating the build out of charging infrastructure and putting money towards it. And then on the state level, there's a lot we can do as well. So to summarize all that, subscribe to our blog. There's lots of action alerts coming in the next 3 months because there's so much happening in the next 3 months.
That's great. Those are kind of the things I wanted to hear about. Thank you.
Great.
Just a comment, just responding a little bit to the person who talked about not having the solar panels. I do have solar panels, and I'm very happy that I have them, but I will not put any more solar panels on because I now have the ability to do 100% green through aggregation. And I'm paying 14.3 cents a kilowatt hour, which is a little bit more than the usual charging amount, but it's a 3-year price that my city's allowing me to do. So one of the things that I constantly look for is all of us, I don't have the EV yet. I've been shopping, and that's a long story, but I'm trying to find the sweet spot of capability and length of ride and price. And it's really hard to find some, and reliability. After the recalls of the EUV, I'm feeling a little bit better about that. But the whole thing is that the graphic I use is to show people a EV pulling a coal power plant behind on a trailer. If you aren't choosing, green electricity, it's questionable in my mind how much better that is than running a gas powered vehicle. So I can do it on my house. Once I get it, I'll be able to do it and charge. Everything will be 100% green, accounted for. But when I go to one of the superchargers or one of the Melrose's, charger on a pole, that sort of thing, I have no way to put in my credit card and say, I want this to be an all green recharge, please. So it's just something to consider.
I will jump in on that real quick because this is a question we get a ton. And we point people to the Union of Concerned Scientists. They have a really excellent tool where you can plug in your zip code and they will show you what the relative emissions are on a per mile basis based on the mix of generators on the electric grid in your area. So in Massachusetts, if you switch from the average gas-powered car to an all-electric vehicle that you charge just on the regular mix you get from the utility, you're cutting your emissions by about 3/4, just because the EVs are so much more efficient. And that will only, the emissions from an EV will only decrease over time because both Massachusetts and Rhode Island have clean energy standards that every year add more and more renewable energy to the mix. So that is a question we get a lot, and I just saw 2 people who wanted to answer that too. Sorry, I jumped the gun, but if anybody has anything to add on that, you're welcome to. I really need to be better about not jumping in on that question, but I just care about that one a lot. Whoever just unmuted, go ahead.
I'll just add to that I'm a member of the Heat Smart Alliance. We are trying to deploy heat pumps in existing homes. And so we were quite conscious of this question, right? Is it better to use electricity to heat homes with a heat pump or fuels? And so we came up with an emissions factor for New England, meaning the ISO New England grid, because all of us live there, certainly all of us in Massachusetts. And it is definitely much better to use an electric car. Now, if you can generate that energy from PV panels on your roof, that's even better. But even if you don't do that, there's a substantial advantage to be had just by plugging in anywhere in Massachusetts.
Those are all great answers. I appreciate that.
This is Jessica. I just wanted to give a couple of examples, maybe concrete ones you can bring with you. One is that electric vehicles and even hybrid vehicles, they have battery regen. That's one of the reasons for the efficiency. Instead of burning brakes, you're putting that energy back in your battery. And 2, that you get economies of scale. So even if you're burning gasoline at a power plant to generate the equivalent amount of electricity, you're doing it at a power plant scale, not a single engine tied to one car scale, which is going to be less efficient. So I would bring those 2 things and sort of the reasoning, the 2 easy ways to sort of understand where you're getting your efficiency from.
There's also another consideration when I looked at solar panels, but I didn't put them in at this point and I also didn't know how much charging I'd be doing before I got the car. There are actually a lot of level 2 chargers kind of popping up in various places. So again, if you're mostly kind of doing shorter routes and you're parking someplace, and you can plug in. So a lot of those are free, or some, like at my work, they have some that are actually around the same or a little lower than the cost I pay at home. So we need more charging, right? We need more level 2, and especially for people who want to take trips to level 3. There was an article in the Globe, I think last week, about how there's some level 3 charging, but it doesn't even work. You pull in, you see Tesla, and there's a couple of non-Tesla chargers and half of them don't work. So of course, people are going to be nervous, right? So if we can get something really visible out there that people could see, oh, if I had an electric car, I could plug it in here and charge it in 20 minutes and be on my way. and I'm going to stop anyways. I think that would go a long way. People are afraid of, we know what people are afraid of: the range, the cost, right? A couple of big, and and available charging. So really, if you want to take long trips and you're not in a Tesla, I think you have to think a lot more carefully about how you're going to do it, especially New England. Perhaps other parts of the country are better. I don't know.
Michael, it looks like you want to respond to that directly, so go for it.
Yep. Yeah. Basically, one of the things that I know that I've been following the news a little bit, and New York State came up with several $1 million to start addressing the level 3 problem on their major highways, which is about time. I can't drive from New England to the Midwest in New York State anymore because there haven't been enough level 3 chargers. But if government and industry would stop and think for a minute that the highway system was designed to go long distances, and service islands that now pump petrol at every service plaza, if they just install level 3 chargers there, I mean, it would go such a long way toward the adoption of EVs, and we don't have that. And that's a major problem in every single state. And even, I mean, California is the most populated EV state in the country, and they seem to be doing a lot right in terms of charging capacity, both level 2 and particularly level 3. And unfortunately, the rest of the country is not getting with the program. And we need to get government and industry up to speed.
Hey, this is Harold. I just wanted to piggyback on what everybody's just said. These issues of having incentives when you buy used cars and new cars and level 3 chargers at plazas and all, there was a part of the Build Back Better plan had those things in there. So as far as the federal government, some people were thinking about that, and then some people axed it. So it's one of those things.
I will say there's a little bit of good news on this front. So in the Investment Infrastructure and Jobs Act, IIJA, there's funding coming to each state for EV charging build out. And in order to receive that funding, the state has to present a plan. So both Massachusetts and Rhode Island are scrambling right now, the DOTs, to build that plan. And in the Senate climate bill that was just passed, there's language in there about building fast charging at all the service plazas on the Mass Pike, and also a certain number of train stations and commuter rail stations. So that is something that folks have their eye on that we'll hopefully see in the coming years. I will pass the mic to Daryl, who has very patiently had his hand raised for a while.
Hi, thank you very much. There we go. I wanted to get back to, I think it was Robert maybe, about, and you said you had an aggregation, you lived in a town with municipal aggregation. Most of those plans, I don't know, Milton is where I live, and we do have what's called municipal aggregation or green aggregation. And Green Energy Consumers Alliance, their wind program provides additional to the state mandate, additional for the default, which is very, very inexpensive electricity and locked in for like 38 months or something. So you can get, you can get 100% renewable energy for a little bit more per kilowatt hour. So the argument that, and Anna has already stated that the Union for Concerned Scientists, they have debunked big time that EVs are really not as good as everybody thinks they are. They certainly are, and the point that every time you don't start that gas engine, you're not burning fossil fuels. So I think it's a really good thing. I do have a question. Can I ask a question quickly? Because I have aggregation and I have solar, what happens to my net metering credits? I don't know, because I only have Eversource as for the delivery, because in the aggregation, the energy comes from, the generation comes from someplace out of Massachusetts, I believe. And then the additional amount comes from, the wind program or something here in Massachusetts or in a tri-state area. So do I get credit when I feed back to the grid on the generation or the delivery? Do you know, Anna?
If it's all right, I will put a pin in that question and hand it to my colleague who knows much more about net metering and solar credits and how all that works. It's
but
very
if that's too much for this conversation, then I can take it offline. Or
yeah, I'll connect you with my colleague Loie, who can definitely answer that question.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Sorry to keep going on and on.
No worries. Mike, go ahead. And then I want to quickly touch on a couple of questions that have stewed up in the chat before we close in a couple minutes.
Okay, two things real quickly. I just calculated using the ISO New England grid emissions factor, a 30 mile per gallon internal combustion car. So the electric car uses about 1/5, that is to say, emits about 20% of the emissions of an internal combustion engine using that grid electricity. Second thing is, yes, the charging infrastructure isn't really there where it needs to be, but there are organizations like EVgo and ChargePoint that do have level 3 chargers dispersed around. There are also compensations for doing a little homework. For example, finding chargers that are free is kind of a hobby for me. And I managed to get up to Acadia National Park and back driving over 950 miles, so spending less than $10 on fuel.
Mike, if you would like to add to our long list of blog posts that folks who have gone on road trips have written to write about that, we would love that.
I'll give that a try.
Michael, go ahead.
Hopefully most people have a better route planner on their phones or iPads so they can locate chargers. It's kind of everybody else besides Tesla. It's our option. So we do have ways to get around, and so there are chargers out there, but we do have to plan for them. Just kind of wanted to put a plug in for a better route planner because it's an awesome app, as well as PlugShare.
I hope that
I would add, kind of comparing all three that I've had. So the Mach-E has a similar built-in navigation like the Teslas, where you put in your trip either from your phone or your car, and it routes it out and tells you you're going to pull into this charger for 15 minutes. You're going to go from 17% to 48%. You're going to arrive at your destination at this percent, and kind of maps it all out. So we didn't take it to Quebec last week, but I just pulled it up on my phone, and it was only an hour and 5 minutes of total charging from like the Boston area all the way to Quebec. 2 stops, one for 15 minutes and one for like 50 minutes. Super easy, built into the car. So, and it even shows you currently 2 out of the 4 chargers are open and available. So you can see that.
That's awesome. And you guys have done an excellent job of asking one of the questions that I didn't get a chance to ask, which was how do you plan a trip if you are driving something that isn't a Tesla? So a better route planner and PlugShare are great choices. Harold, I see you grinning. Yep, the rest of us live a different life. One question that we didn't get to is about plug-in hybrid. And most of the EV owners on this call actually drive battery electric vehicles. But Daryl, I know that you have driven both a plug-in hybrid with the Volt and an all-electric with a Bolt. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yes, I can. I'm making blueberry muffins right now, but I'll go quickly. I bought the Volt in 2017. So it's going on 6 years that I've had that vehicle. And I love that vehicle. They don't make it anymore, but I don't drive on gas. I mean, I can get in this. I think it's rated for like 56 miles. But in the summer, I get 75 miles on a charge. And, I drive all around, the Boston area, and I don't drive 75 miles a day, or I don't even drive 50 miles a day. So I'm always on battery. And the engine comes on every, month or 2 because I haven't used any gas. And it says, we're starting your engine to do just routine maintenance. And it goes through this whole thing. Which is, and you don't want to fill up the tank really because you don't ever use the gas hardly. In the wintertime, it's a little less, definitely less miles. I get more closer to the 50 or 45. So I love that. I love that vehicle, and we've had it for a long time, and we were taking it on trips. So we bought the Bolt in 2018, and we just got a new battery in December of 21 through the battery recall thing. So our mileage increased, and we received 8 years and 100,000 miles on the new battery. And I was very concerned about it because when I first bought it, I couldn't drive. I go to Michigan most every summer to see family, and I couldn't drive from Boston to Michigan with the Bolt. There was no charging across New York State. I could cut through Canada, and they had more charging there. But now I'm going to try to drive it this summer to Michigan and to the upper part of Michigan. So I've done a little bit of route planning. And I'm a little nervous about it because, but I'm going to do it by myself on the way out. So I won't have anybody else's schedule to determine. But it looks like I can go and I can do it because there's enough charges if they all work. On Earth Day, I did a free charge on what do you call it, Electrify America. And the Bolt is supposed to take, on the DC fast charging, supposed to take like 80 kilowatts. I never got over 42, and I had the battery range down at the state of charge was like 38 or 9%. I thought I should have been getting better than that. And I talked to another guy who was charging a Volvo all battery, and he said those chargers never put out, like he could take 100 or 150, and he was only getting 75. So at any rate, I don't like Chevrolet because I don't think that that they really care and know what they're doing. I'd love to get the Ford, the Mach-E. I've driven that. I rented a Tesla out in LA for a couple of weeks, and love the planner. Told me when I should leave the charger, how much I was going to have. That is really, really a wonderful thing, and that's where all of these other kind of systems don't work. So I'm glad Ford is doing that. I have $100 on the Lightning, and I have $100 on the Ioniq 5 just to see if I could get one of those cars. But at any rate, I do like the Volt very much so, because I don't ever drive on gas, and unless I take it on, out of town on trips, which I've done, 3,000-mile trips. But still, when you get there, you're on battery. So, and I've charged it mostly for free. So that's another part of it. Hotels, restaurants, everything. And I tell them I'm here because you can let me charge, so, and that does help. That, it really truly does help if you give them feedback about why you're there. I could have stayed across the street. It was even cheaper, but I'm here because I could charge my car. So, okay, I got to get my muffins in the oven. So thank you. I appreciate this session though, very much.
Thank you. I wish you could hand us all a fresh blueberry muffin through the screen, because I would appreciate one right now. We only have 2 minutes left, so I wanted to make one shameless plug for a webinar that we'll be hosting later this spring, which will focus on all the new EV models coming out in the next couple of years and compare them and just sort of report back where the manufacturers are on production and what cost might look like. So if you're in the market for a car in the next couple of years, that would be a good one. But for the next minute, if there are any final thoughts from any of our EV ambassadors, I yield the floor.
I guess one of the biggest issues, I think, is range anxiety. People have this fear of running out of power. And really, it helps to just start small. And with a 250-mile range, you can actually make that small pretty large. And as you go along, as you try to find chargers and all that, you'll get more confident. So it's a little bit of a leap of faith, but not so much.
Carol, I saw you waving your hand. Go ahead.
I know we're almost out of time. I'd love to see you do a webinar that addresses the needs of people in multifamily buildings and the incredible challenges of getting chargers here. I'm speaking in particular in a condo situation. Love to hear from fellow owners.
We actually did some webinars in the spring and developed some resources specifically for folks in that situation that we can email out to you. But that's a good reminder. We should repeat one of those webinars.
Thank you.
I'm just going to send out a message to everybody that we're closing in a minute, but that'll give us 60 more seconds to chat about something.
I guess the only other thing I'd say is that consider putting a charger in your house. Most chargers are done at home. Most charging is done at home. So invest in that charger and you'll feel comfortable and secure with the battery electric car.
I agree with that statement. I have a charger at home, and that's the only way I would probably do it. It's very convenient. It's plugged in. It's 100% every day that I want it, and it's the way to go.
Anna, I assume we'll get notification about these webinars about the new models.
Yes.
Those of us who got this notification, thank you.
Adriana will make sure of that.
Great.
That's her job. Okay, I am hearing from the other room that they're going slightly over, but I think this is a natural place to end this for now. So thank you very much for joining us all. You will get a follow-up email from us with some resources. Thank you, Jackie, for the applause. And I hope we'll see you all at another event and maybe some upcoming in-person events this summer, now that the weather is nice. But I'll hang out here for another minute while the other room closes, but it's nice to see you all.
Well, this
Nice
is
to see
Daryl
you.
again. We're just hanging out. Milton is having a green fair on Saturday, Cunningham Hall, 12 to 4. And we're going to have a guy that does battery landscaping commercially. He's building the 4th all battery quiet crew trailer, solar powered, and he's going to be there. And I would love to have green energy stuff there to show up on the wall. Did green energy? Oh, there you are, Alice. So I talked to Larry, or I emailed him yesterday about it. But come on out. We're going to have some EVs and a whole bunch of green stuff. Milton, okay. Cunningham Hall.
I'm sure that's in my email, and you will hear from me when I've gotten to that email.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks for moderating this, Anna.
Thanks. I always have to reach out because you guys are great.
The only thing left is to pick up a million.
Thank you so much. And it's exciting that there's another Mach-E owner in the group.
If only we could, help people
We
get
need
them
more.
here.
Ford sold 10 times less than they planned because they can't make them.
All over the place.
It's terrible.
Don't worry, my wife is considering a Mach-E.
To the loose ends.
Maybe there's some on some dealer lots. That's about all I see right now. And then you can't order them. So good luck.
Oh, that's what I do.
But it is a fun car to drive. It is good. And you don't have to pay a fortune to get the top model. It's a nice middle.
6-year-old sweater.
Good.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say for Harold, for your wife, we have a wait list set up where we're just gathering a list of people who care about the Mach-E. And as soon as we hear anything from any dealership, we will email that whole list.
So I would say too, I bought mine in Maine because there's a lot more in Maine because there's people buy less EVs and you can get them at MSRP, no markup. And my coworker just picked one up 2 weeks ago. The dealer also just in Brunswick emailed me today. They're like, we have 2 on the lot, at MSRP if you're interested. I'm like, I already have one, but it's worth the 1.5-hour drive to get a car and save thousands.
That is some good intel.
Thank you.
Where in Maine?
Darling, Ford in Brunswick, but then also like Quirk. You can call those Ford dealers. A lot of them have abandoned orders. And knowing that like the credit will probably expire.
So it really would do me well.
They're on the lots, but they will, and they won't have the market. But what I typically see is they're insisting you take their financing. Which is something I did, but it's not a big deal to get out of it after. But that's how they're able to make some more. They're still in that dealer mentality, right? You got to make something extra.
Right. Well, so you make 1 or 2 payments. That's what I did when I did it. And then I went to DCU and they even give you a break on if you drive an EV or something. So I don't know what the rate
exactly
was. 1.49 or something.
Paying 1.7 because I didn't get the direct deposit or whatever. But yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for all you people, and for Anna and Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
my bar
Yeah, appreciate all the hard work you guys.
to kind of get a sense of the bottom. But I think once I finish the
I keep hearing that going. Wait, who is that? Oh, apparently the other room is closed now, so we will head off. We'll close this room.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a webinar on the grid modernization and electric vehicle dockets that are currently before the Department of Public Utilities. This is a pretty niche and energy nerdy topic, so we're really excited that you all are here today to talk about it with us. But we think this is one of the most important things currently going on in Massachusetts when it comes to implementing the climate roadmap legislation and moving towards our climate goals. I am Kai. I'm the policy coordinator at Green Energy Consumers, where I work primarily on electricity and buildings energy policy, including grid modernization, which I'll be focusing on today. And I'm here with Mal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mal Skoran. I'm the Transportation Program and Policy Coordinator for Green Energy Consumers. I basically fill in all of the gaps that Kai doesn't do related to transportation because she's really busy with the renewable energy, grid modernization, and energy efficiency aspects of our advocacy, which you'll learn all about today. But really grateful to be here and happy to see so many people joining us.
Yes, and most of you are familiar with Green Energy Consumers, but we are an organization that is dedicated to speeding the transition to a low carbon future. We have a number of energy programs that we hope you are all part of. If you're not familiar with them, you can read about them on our website. But we also work on policy and advocacy, and that is because we believe that the programs that we offer, which make clean energy and green energy choices more affordable for consumers, should be available to everyone. That should be the norm when it comes to our energy system. And part of getting to that goal of green energy choices being the easy and obvious norm is the type of programs that we'll be talking about today that are currently before the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. So let's jump into things. As a reminder, you are all muted and there will be time for Q&A at the end of the session. So please feel free to drop in questions into the question box at any point. If you're having technical difficulties, type that into the chat or the questions box and we will be able to respond to you. Our contact information was available on the prior slide. It will be available at the end. We are also recording this session so that you may access it later or share it with other folks if you thought it was interesting. And we'll make sure to send out the slides and the recording after the webinar. Today, we'll start with talking about what the DPU is, that's the Department of Public Utilities, and what this term docket means. And then we'll jump into the two different categories of cases that we're working on currently, grid modernization and electric transportation. So, why is utility regulation relevant to decarbonization? And I'm actually just going to back up and talk a little bit about the Department of Public Utilities and what that is. Could we actually jump to maybe the next slide quickly? We'll come back to this question. Great. Yes, let's talk about the electric grid. So we all turn on our lights, we have electricity, we charge our electric vehicles if we have them, and many of us don't really understand how the electric grid works. And that's totally fine because it works 99% of the time. But we have some very key entities to thank for why it is so reliable and why we can not think about it most of the time. That includes the regulators, which is the Department of Public Utilities, and the utility companies. This is the traditional electric grid. A little bit later today, we'll be talking about a modernized electric grid and how the electric grid has changed, but this is a simplified version of the basic structure of our traditional electric system. There is a generating station, that's usually a fossil fueled power plant. In New England, natural gas is the most common. The generating station produces electricity by burning fossil fuels traditionally. That is sent along transmission lines all throughout New England. Here in New England, we're on a regional electric grid, so we're getting electricity from different places around New England. And then after it has gone on these highways of electricity, the transmission lines, the voltage will be stepped down at a substation, and that is where it enters the distribution system. That's the green lines on this diagram. The distribution system is like the local roads, we might say, and that is all built and maintained by the electric distribution company. That in Massachusetts is National Grid or Eversource or Unitil in some folks' cases. And then the electric distribution company is responsible for getting that high voltage electricity from the transmission system to your house reliably, fixing outages on the distribution system. And then also a whole bunch of other programs has become a part of the distribution company's responsibilities. So a distribution company is a regulated monopoly. And that's because it wouldn't make any sense to have multiple competing sets of distribution systems, where in a traditional competitive marketplace, you can choose between companies. You only have one choice depending on where you live of the company that is your distribution company. Utilities are legal monopolies. That's just true in general. And for a legal monopoly to be able to work out without any, monopolies are bad because they can jack up prices, but you can combat the bad aspects of monopolies by having them closely regulated by the state. And we have a special state agency in Massachusetts called the Department of Public Utilities that exists to regulate these legal monopolies. The Department of Public Utilities approves the rates set by the utility companies. It approves investment plans. It oversees things like the energy efficiency programs and many more aspects of a utilities business. And today we'll be talking about two cases before the Department of Public Utilities, where the electric utility companies, the electric distribution companies, are proposing a certain set of investments that they want ratepayers to pay for. And it is up to the DPU to decide if this is in the benefit of ratepayers, if it's the benefit of Massachusetts more broadly, and whether or not the utility company should be allowed to charge ratepayers for these investments and then make those investments into the grid technology. So now to go back to the beginning, why is this important to climate change? Well, the electric system is responsible for a lot of emissions. It's about 20–25% of our emissions currently in Massachusetts. But as we electrify our heating sector and our transportation sector, the electric sector becomes increasingly important. And the electric distribution company has to make sure that the electric sector is as efficient as possible and also able to meet the demand of a electrified transportation and heating sector. So it's up to the electric distribution company to make sure that there is enough renewable energy power coming into the grid, enough renewable energy being delivered reliably to customers to power an increasingly electrified world, and finally to make sure that that's all happening as efficiently as possible and saving as much energy as possible. We need to do this. The DPU has recognized in orders over the last year that big changes are necessary in the immediate future in order to meet our climate goals, and that is why these two dockets, these two cases, are before us today. So now I will launch into the process of the grid modernization dockets and processes overall. So to go back to that previous slide, the DPU makes these decisions. I've already talked about how these cases are an example of the utility companies proposing investments and seeking approval of investments. The DPU is taking a year to consider these proposed investments and decide whether or not it is going to approve the technology investments the utility companies have proposed. The DPU last summer issued a directive saying that the utility companies, recognizing that all of this work needs to be done to prepare our electric grid and our transportation systems for meeting our climate goals, the DPU required the utility companies to submit proposals on technology investments on grid modernization, smart meters, and electric vehicle programs. The utilities developed their proposals over the summer, and now that the proposals have been filed, we have been in the midst of a maybe 8-month so far process of stakeholders like us giving our opinion on whether these proposals are good, what aspects should be approved, if there's anything we should change. The DPU is considering all of this incredible body of evidence from expert testifiers, hearings, and more, and decisions should be coming within the next couple of months on these proposals. So let's launch into grid modernization dockets. What is grid modernization? We'll start here. We already talked about what the traditional electric grid looks like. It looks like fossil fuel generating stations producing power, and they go through the transmission system, and the distribution company is responsible for getting that fossil fuel power to the customer. This is unidirectional, and it is kind of blind. One thing that I think a lot of folks don't realize is that a utility company currently doesn't really have any idea what's going on its power lines without sending someone out to the power line to, for example, see if there's an outage, check how much power is running through that line at a given time. And for example, utility companies still rely on people calling them up when there's an outage to know when and where an outage is occurring. We can do a lot better with today's technology. Our electric grid has remained largely unchanged for over a century, or since it was really rolled out in the early 20th century. And today we have an electric system that is increasingly multilateral. There's generation occurring on rooftop solar, distributed generation like solar, in neighborhoods. There's also battery storage. There's electric vehicles and electric heat pumps driving up the power needs. And there's also a lot more technology to improve sensing and visibility onto the grid, so the utility company is no longer blind when it comes to the electricity that is flowing through its lines at any given time. We can go to the next slide, because the next slide compares what a modernized grid looks like. I stole this from Puget Sound Energy, which is a West Coast utility, where they are a lot farther along than we are when it comes to grid modernization. So this diagram kind of repeats what I just said. In a modernized grid, there is more distributed renewable energy. You have often conservation voltage reduction, which is technology that is added to substations and grid systems to improve the efficiency of our grid and reduce electricity loss along the lines. You have battery storage, and you also, this is crucial, you enable your customers to contribute to the efficiency of the grid. And we'll talk about that a lot later when it comes to smart meters. And we'll go to the next slide. A brief history of the grid modernization dockets. Back in 2018, people in Massachusetts have been talking about grid modernization for a very long time. National Grid did a pilot of smart meters and grid modernization starting in 2012, maybe. We'll talk about the results of that pilot very briefly. Back in 2018, smart meters were denied in the last time that the DPU considered grid modernization proposals from the utility companies. But the DPU did approve a first round of grid modernization investments that included some of that sensing and grid efficiency technology that I mentioned earlier. Last summer, the DPU finally ordered utility companies to submit updated grid modernization plans. And this time it said that it would definitely approve smart meters. Not only would it consider smart meters again, the DPU wanted to require the utility companies to roll out smart meters statewide in conjunction with time-varying rates and other new energy programs that will be necessary to reduce emissions over the coming decades. The utility plans were filed over the summer. These list of docket numbers, 2180, 2181, 2182, that refers specifically to each utility company's case. So Eversource, National Grid, and Unitil are the three investor-owned utilities in Massachusetts, and each one of those has its own set of plans, testimony, information, hearings related to grid modernization. We became interveners in just two of those cases, 2180 and 2181, which is National Grid, or Eversource and National Grid, respectively. And we didn't intervene on Unitil because Unitil only serves a very small area. Not that that isn't important, but we wanted to maximize our bang for the buck. Eversource, National Grid cover most of the state. As an intervener, we are an official stakeholder. which means that we have special status to ask the utility companies questions and make sure we get responses, to file expert testimony, which we filed expert testimony in the grid modernization docket, which I was our expert witness in this docket. And we also have filed server rebuttal testimony, where we reviewed the testimony from all of the other stakeholders and responded, stating what we thought was good and what we thought was bad, what we agreed with, what we thought was incorrect. Next week is very exciting. Next week is our hearings for the grid modernization case, and that's an opportunity for us to ask questions of other testifiers, other witnesses, and other parties in the docket will also be able to cross-examine me as an expert witness. All of this is in pursuit of more evidence, more information for the DPU, which will consider it and make its decision on the grid modernization proposals. All right, next slide. Early on in this case, the DPU divided the different grid modernization proposals into track 1 and track 2 investments. Track 1 is only referring to new proposed investment in grid-facing technology that was already approved by the DPU. As I mentioned, back in 2018, the DPU decided to allow investment into a smaller set of technology, specifically grid-facing technology. So that's technology that customers don't even really know is there. It's the sensing, the monitoring, and the volt var optimization, which is a type of grid efficiency technology. And then they also categorized some of the proposals as track 2, new investments, investments that haven't previously been approved by the DPU. This is primarily smart meters, as well as the back-end data analysis technology and communications technology that enable smart meter data to get from your home to the utility company, be processed and put to good use. We are especially interested in smart meter technology, and that's where basically all of our comments, testimony have been focused on track 2. This little diagram on the right here shows, it's kind of confusing. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but the point that it is trying to make is that a smart meter is crucial to a smart home, and we believe that the smart home and that interfacing with the grid, becoming part of a larger energy system as an energy consumer, is crucial to meeting our climate goals. Next slide. Smart meters. So we do not have smart meters in Massachusetts for the most part, although Unitil customers actually do. Smart meters look pretty much like your normal electric meter, but they are way, way more powerful. This is a great time to be considering smart meters in Massachusetts because most of our meters, which are what we might call dumb meters, or AMR is the technical term, those meters are reaching the end of their useful life statewide. So we're going to have to start thinking about replacing the existing fleet of electric meters in Massachusetts. And while we're at it, why not replace them with smart meters, which vastly expand the capability of meters. Currently, our meters are read once a month. They have a little radio chip in them. So basically the electric utility can just drive a van around and the radio chip transmits how much electricity you used in that month to the van, and then you are charged for your electric usage based on how much electricity you used in that month. It is read once per month, and that's it. A smart meter is able to transmit data on how much electricity you used constantly to the electric utility. It's able to record how much electricity you're using at any given time with seconds or microsecond intervals, and then it is able to transmit that to the utility at 15-minute intervals or less. With these much smaller incremental data intervals, we are able to do things like charge you based on how much you're using at any given time. We're able to do time of use electric rates, where you are charged more for how much electricity you're using during peak electric demand times. And it also enables some really, really cool technology like load disaggregation, where you can find out how much your refrigerator is using compared to your microwave. So you're able to disaggregate the different appliances in your home. We'll go to the next slide. Smart meters have become the norm throughout the country. The large majority of electric customers throughout the United States do have smart meters. You can see that Rhode Island and Massachusetts are actually a small island in the United States where we don't have smart meters. California and Texas have had smart meters for a long time, and that has enabled a lot of innovative different energy efficiency and demand response programs. Another great example of a state that has made great use of smart meters is Maryland, where they have been able to, again, create really innovative time-varying rate structures, energy efficiency, and demand response programs based off of that smart meter data. Next slide. The benefits of smart meters include enabling time-varying rates, which we'll talk about in the next coming slides, real-time access to your own energy usage. Again, I'm an energy nerd, but I would love to be able to log on to an energy portal online and find out how much energy I was using the day before that. I can track trends. I can say, oh, both me and my roommates have been working from home a lot this past week and our electricity usage went way up. Or, you know, I could be on vacation. I could monitor my electric usage at home and figure out that, you know, there was a problem with the refrigerator. Some people have discovered problems with their appliances because there was a weird spike or drop off in electric usage. This also allows remote notifications of outages, so the utility company can better pinpoint outages, better respond to power outages, and get people back up and running much faster. There's a lot of opportunity for efficiency. All of this data will enable Mass Save, the energy efficiency program administrators, to design better, more targeted energy efficiency programs that respond to how much energy people are using at different times of the day. I already discussed the benefits of load disaggregation, and Matt will talk about this later, but because of load disaggregation, you can use smart meters to design special electricity rates for the electricity you use to charge an electric vehicle. And this is really, really promising for making electric vehicles an affordable option for Massachusetts families, and also for minimizing the impact of electric vehicles on the electric grid. We'll go to the next slide. And one thing I'll actually mention on the subject of benefits of smart meters is that both utility companies in their smart meters proposals have done a cost benefit analysis of smart meters and of the benefits it will bring to Massachusetts. And they have both found that this is a cost-effective technology for Massachusetts. We actually believe that they are underestimating the benefits of these programs. For example, Eversource did not try to quantify the benefits of time-varying rates whatsoever in their smart meter proposal. And we know that smart meters and time-varying rates save money for consumers, as well as reducing emissions, reducing burden on the grid. And so we believe that these will be an extremely beneficial, cost-effective technology for Massachusetts. One of the main sources of benefits is from reducing the peak. If any of you are participants in Shave the Peak, you know that our peak energy demand, so the few times a year or even times during the day when we're using the most electricity and everyone is using the most electricity, drive the majority of our costs on our electric system. The Massachusetts State of Charge report concluded that 10% of hours throughout the year account for 40% of the costs. And we have to size our whole distribution system, our whole electric system, to meet just those few hours a year when there's the peak. We keep online dirty fossil fuel generation just to meet that peak. This only gets worse if we electrify more and more and we don't minimize the impact of electrification on our peak electricity demand. I've explained that the peak is polluting and expensive. This diagram shows how the wholesale price of electricity does go up a lot during peak hours. However, this is not reflected whatsoever in the price that we pay for electricity as consumers. And that means that people are not incentivized to reduce their electric usage during the peak. I have been running the Shave the Peak program, which is a voluntary notification to help you reduce your electricity usage during the yearly peak electric days. And the single comment that I get most frequently is how can I know what an impact my reduction in electricity usage during the peak made? And followed by, is there a way that I can be incentivized or paid for the grid services that I am providing by reducing the peak? The answer to both of those questions is smart meters. Smart meters is how we incentivize people to reduce the peak, and also how we can measure the impact that people's peak shaving has had. We've known these benefits for a long time. I'm not going to go into this summary of benefits, but in the mid 2010s, so 2015 or so, National Grid ran a pilot where they gave people smart meters and evaluated the impact of different time varying rates. They found that the stronger the time varying rate, the stronger the price signal, the more benefits to consumers, the more people saved money, and the more they reduced peak electricity demand. We know that smart meters work, that time varying rates work, and that consumers enjoy having smart meters. We can go to the next slide. These are the points that we've made in our testimony. We need to roll out smart meters and time varying rates as soon as possible to get all of those benefits. The utility companies have wanted to kind of have slow timelines. We think Massachusetts consumers are ready for time varying rates, and we should get them as soon as possible. We also need to make sure, this has been a really, really big conversation. Utility companies want to control the data that is coming from smart meters. We know that in the 21st century, data is valuable, data is money, and the utility companies want to own that data. They don't want to give that to just anyone. However, that is a big problem for designing good energy efficiency programs and good energy policy. We believe that municipal aggregation should have full access to data, as well as Mass Save and the energy efficiency administrators, policymakers, and more, so that we can design lots of energy efficiency programs and offer Massachusetts residents a variety of energy programs that make good use of smart meter data. As I stated also, we did a survey over the fall that showed that Massachusetts consumers want to see their energy data. 90% would make use of financial incentives to respond to peaks. And I think the next slide might be my final one. Or that's it. Yeah, so what's up next on the dockets is we have our hearings next week, and we don't have an exact timeline for when we get a decision from the utility companies, but we hope that we're able to announce that smart meters are coming to all of us in the near future. And I'll pass it to Mel.
Thanks, Kai. You really are able to fit a lot of information that's in the weeds about our electricity system in a short amount of time, and that certainly makes it a lot easier for me to talk about the electric transportation portion of what the various utilities have proposed to the DPU for approval. So I will quickly just start off by saying that the structure of these dockets are very similar to the grid modernization dockets. So the DPU ordered the utility companies to figure out their next phase of how to support electric vehicle adoption in Massachusetts. And that's partly because of the 2021 climate roadmap bill that passed, which made it clear that every state agency in Massachusetts has a role to play in decarbonizing the state in total, including the DPU. So we're really excited to be able to participate as an intervener to figure out how to advance EV technology through the investments that the utilities are making. And it's worth noting that there's already been significant investment in electric vehicle charging by the utilities over the last couple of years. The utilities are really interested in electric vehicles for a few reasons. The key one to note is that the transition to electric cars is going to mean more consumption of electricity rather than consumption of gasoline or diesel fuels. And so the utilities are really interested in supporting that because more people are consuming electricity. That means they have a vested interest in that. And so over the last couple of years, we've seen hundreds and thousands of charging stations being installed across the state in both Eversource and National Grid territory. And those were all public, workplace, and multi-unit dwelling charging. So primarily places where you can access it publicly. And that was proposals roughly of $40 million for Eversource, and National Grid invested $25 million for what they've done so far. There's also been some proposals to make sure that EV drivers are incentivized to charge off-peak as much as possible. So some of you may be participants in one of these managed charging programs, either Eversource's Connected Solutions program that gives you a cash incentive to participate in their program, and then they manage your charging rate if you drive an EV, or one of National Grid's programs that either gives you a flat rate for participating or gives you a rebate for every kilowatt hour that you charge off peak. And so we're supportive of both of these ideas. And we're very excited to see really big expansions in these most recent proposals. So this is what's already been done. Where are we in the process? The timeline, again, closely follows what Kai outlined with the grid modernization dockets. So the utilities filed plans last July, and since then, the DPU and a variety of other stakeholders, including EV charging companies, the Attorney General, clean energy supporters like Green Energy Consumers, and some of our allies at the Conservation Law Foundation and Sierra Club. We're all reviewing the proposals and providing our own input and expertise as to what's needed and what's not. And so our evidentiary hearings just happened last week. We're very close to filing our final brief or statement of what we think about the proposals in total. So I do just want to take a quick step back and talk about why these dockets are so important to Massachusetts' ability to meeting its climate goals. The key thing to know is that transportation is the largest source of climate warming emissions in Massachusetts. And so electrifying vehicles is going to be a major component of the state's strategy to be able to meet its 2030 mandate to reduce emissions. The state estimates that we need about 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030 in order to stay on pace with that goal to reduce emissions by 50% economy-wide in 2030. Right now, we only have about 50,000 electric cars on the road right now. So you can see it's a huge increase in electric vehicles that needs to happen in order to meet that goal. So we at Green Energy Consumers believe that the support that can be offered from the utility companies is going to be really important to make sure that there's charging access everywhere where base staters need it in order to be able to feel comfortable switching to an electric vehicle. And just to give you a visualization of the challenge ahead of us, you can see each year electric vehicle adoption has been growing. So in that sense, you know, we're on our way. But if we continue the current trend of EV adoption, we're only going to get to about half of the electric vehicles that we need on the road by 2030, which is plainly not enough. So the blue line is where we're headed without further policy intervention, and the green line is where we need to go in order to make sure that we stay in line with our climate goals. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and these proposals are going to be really important to help meet that. So what exactly have the utility companies proposed to do? First, and I'll go into each of these in more detail, they want to expand their support for installing public and workplace charging. They also want to help homeowners and other folks in Massachusetts install charging at home. They want to support the electrification of fleets, and that's a National Grid specific proposal. Eversource wasn't quite there yet for some reasons I'll discuss later. They want to provide more incentives for folks that live in environmental justice communities to be able to install charging. And they want to make sure that for EV drivers that are charging off peak, which Kai had discussed, they're compensated for the benefits that that delivers to the grid. And so I'll go into each of these in more detail. Just to provide a little bit more context about how these incentives work, there's really two components of installing an EV charging station. The first is all of the behind the scenes, underground cables and wires to make sure that we can deliver electricity to where cars are being parked. So that usually includes upgrades to the distribution network or transformers. It can require putting a meter in. It can mean putting in a new electrical panel at the site to manage all of that charging infrastructure. And all of those investments are lumped under the term make ready. So the idea is you're making the site ready for electric vehicle charging. And that's what the utilities have supported. With this most recent proposal, they're not only expanding their make ready support, but they're also adding incentives to help pay for the charging infrastructure itself. So we're talking about the actual station that you would plug into the vehicle. And so we find that when you pair both of these together, it dramatically reduces the cost of installing an EV charging station, whether you're an office place, whether you own a home, maybe you own a business and you want to install charging. And so providing support for both the charging equipment and the underground wires and cables is really important to make sure that the technology is accessible and so that we can expand our charging network as fast as possible. I noted that a lot of what has already been done has been in the public and workplace segment. And so you can see there's been an explosion of EV charging across the state. There definitely can be more, and we're excited to see that the proposals that are coming in the coming years, if they're approved by the DPU, are going to be a huge investment for public charging. So the programs are sized to meet about 80% of the total charging need by 2025. And so it's a big chunk of what we need to do to make people feel comfortable switching to an electric car. We're also excited to know that there's money coming down from the federal level as well to continue to make these investments in public charging so that you can take your EV on a road trip, for example. So you can see estimates of how much money is being invested and what that will translate to in terms of the number of ports that have been installed. So huge increase here that we're very excited about. Something that's brand new that we're really happy about is the residential offering. The fact is the majority of EV drivers currently charge at home. And so installing charging where people need it is going to advance EV adoption way beyond what just supporting public and workplace charging could accomplish. And so there are different scaled incentives depending on whether you live in a 1 to 4 unit home or whether you live in a large multi-unit building. Both, we think, are going to be really important to make sure that the upfront costs of driving an electric vehicle are addressed, because many people in Massachusetts are finding that they need to install a level 2 charging station at home to feel comfortable driving an EV. And so that effectively can be like adding $1,200 to the upfront cost of a new car because of the cost it requires to install that infrastructure at home. These programs are sized to meet about 15% of the total need estimated by 2025 in order to stay on track to our 2030 goal. And so while it's a small portion of that total goal, we're excited to see that this is a new program and that the utilities are responding to the needs of what drivers are asking for and what the barriers are to EV adoption currently. I'll note that we need both public and home charging in order to encourage EV adoption, but Green Energy Consumers has been particularly supportive of the residential incentives because modeling done by the state of Massachusetts has shown that support for charging at home increases EV adoption much faster than investments in public and workplace. So you can see there, the graph shows how much additional new EVs are put on the road with each policy intervention. And so the interventions that expand charging access at home put more EVs on the road than there otherwise would be. And so it's not just meeting drivers where they're at and making EV charging more accessible to people. These investments are actually going to help meet our 2030 climate goal, according to the state's own modeling. So we're very excited about that. I mentioned that National Grid is also doing a special fleet program. So they have a specific portion of their budget allocated for helping private and nonprofit fleets assess which vehicles can be electrified, expand charging so that they can charge their fleet vehicles, and also prepare substation and transmission and distribution infrastructure to help support the electrification of those vehicles. The thing that we're most excited about from National Grid's proposal is the fact that they are requesting about $50 million to support electric school bus purchases. This is really exciting for a few reasons. Number one, children are particularly vulnerable to the health impacts of diesel that come from traditional school buses. So we think that this is going to go a long way to improving the health of kids across the state. But it's also a huge opportunity to start investing in some exciting new technology called vehicle to grid that school buses are really apt for, which means, you know, they're parked most of the day, so they can be used as essentially a mobile battery and a grid asset. So we're hoping that National Grid's support of electric school buses will be able to advance some new exciting technology there. And so we are disappointed that Eversource wasn't offering a commensurate proposal, but really cool to see National Grid taking that step forward to support electric school buses. Another cool component that we're excited about at Green Energy Consumers is the fact that there's been special care taken to make sure that people who live in environmental justice communities aren't left behind in the transition to electric vehicles. So the state defines environmental justice communities according to income, minority makeup, or English language isolation. And so you'll see the map there. According to the map there are communities across the state that have additional barriers to EV adoption. And so we're excited that across all of the utility programs, there is additional support for people who live in environmental justice communities so that they can access charging. And there's a note that you know, we can't leave anyone behind in the transition to electric vehicles. And so kind of going back to the school buses, we think that electrifying those medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles in particular is going to be really helpful to make sure that everyone sees the benefits of EV adoption, not just people who are switching to electric cars first. And so kind of along that vein, one other aspect of the proposals that Green Energy Consumers is supportive of is trying to make sure that EV drivers are incentivized to charge off-peak as much as possible. Kai noted that there are certain times during the day where there's more electricity consumption and therefore higher costs. And electric vehicles can be a key opportunity to lower those costs because they're flexible in terms of when they can be charged. So as an example, rather than plugging in your car at 3 p.m. when there's higher costs, if we can encourage EV drivers to shift their charging to overnight when costs are lower, then we can lower the overall costs to the system, as well as compensating drivers for the fact that they're not contributing to higher costs. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 there. And this kind of goes to a question or a concern that I hear very often about electric vehicles, which is, you know, they're going to overload our electricity system. But actually, when they're charged with smart programs in a managed way, they can be an asset to the grid. So in places like California that have had smart EV charging programs for a while, there's been clear information and data that shows that electric vehicles bring in more revenue than they cost to add to the system. So that means they're effectively putting downward pressure on rates for all ratepayers, not just those who are driving an electric vehicle. And so the more that we can support off-peak charging through smart incentive programs, that means we can lead to more EV adoption because it costs less to fuel an electric vehicle if you're getting a rebate for charging off-peak or if you're incentivized to charge off-peak in some other way. And also it's beneficial to the larger system because we're not incurring those higher costs. So in our advocacy on these grid EV charging proposals, we've tried to make that very clear, is that EV drivers should have access and be encouraged to participate in these programs as much as possible. And we have good survey data from our own members that show that people are really interested in charging off-peak, especially if it'll save them money. One key component of our advocacy is not just making sure that these programs are available, but that they adequately compensate EV drivers for the total sum of benefits that they provide to the grid. So in the existing National Grid program, they only offer a rebate of 5 cents for every kilowatt hour of electricity consumed off-peak for the electric car. And that is just not commensurate with the total benefits that charging electric cars off-peak brings to the grid. And so we had some economists at the Applied Economics Clinic do some of their own analysis to figure out the true value of off-peak EV charging. And they found that the value can be as high as 14.1 cents for every kilowatt hour charged off-peak. So we're trying to push hard to make sure that EV drivers get those benefits and receive those benefits, because it'll help encourage more people switch to electric cars. Massachusetts has one of the highest electric utility rates in the country. And so making sure that EV drivers have access to a more affordable way to charge their electric cars is going to be really crucial to help encourage people to make the switch, because other states have a better cost differential between gasoline and electricity. And so we want to be able to offer that in Massachusetts as well. And the best part is, because these are savings that electric cars are contributing to, it's not a cross subsidy. It's not giving something extra to EV drivers. It's just a reflection of the benefits that electric vehicles have on the grid. Oh, skipped a slide there. We're coming close to the end, but there are lots of other interesting parts of the electric vehicle docket that I wasn't able to discuss more in detail that we're very excited about. As an example, National Grid is expanding their offering of pole-mounted chargers, which there was a pilot for in Melrose, to be able to figure out a way to provide electric vehicle charging for those who park on the street. And so we're supporting an expansion of that program as they've proposed, because we think it's a good idea and it just makes sense. Utility poles already have electric service there, and so we think this is a good way to help expand the public charging network and also help people feel more comfortable switching to an EV. There's also proposals to co-locate DC fast charging with energy storage on the grid, which we think can help defray some costs, as well as other things like workforce training to make sure that there are plenty of electricians that can do this work to install all of the charging that we're going to need in the next decade to meet our climate goals. So with that, I see we have 10 minutes left, and I am sure that there are plenty of great questions popping up. And so happy to take those on, along with any questions for Kai about the grid modernization piece.
Thanks so much, Mel. I will start by asking you some of the questions that are related to electric cars. So starting off from the most recent, will electric buses be able to recharge during off-peak and sell back at peak charging rates? Very specific question.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had some trouble finding the unmute button, sorry. Yeah, so that's actually one thing that we are supporting in our brief that's going to be filed next week, is we think that the electric school buses are going to have a large opportunity to test out some of those exciting energy arbitrage technologies where, you know, you can figure out how to use the school bus that's plugged in as an energy storage mechanism. And so that potentially in the future could be a revenue source for schools that have, you know, let's say 20 electric school buses parked in one place. That could be a new source of revenue for schools that have that. So unclear exactly what the programs are going to look like, but we are going to be supporting that kind of preparation for the future. And I think National Grid is aware of those technologies existing and have mentioned them as part of their reasoning to be offering the rebate for school buses.
Great. Next question is, when or will we be able to use bidirectional EV charging equipment? To clarify, that would be using the EV battery as a home storage battery in case of blackout or for other reasons.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very excited about that technology as well. And the key thing to remember is that there are kind of two sides to that technology. The first is you need to have a vehicle that can send energy in two directions. So for folks that have seen the promotion for the Ford F-150 Lightning, that's been a key part of their marketing, is they're saying that the pickup truck is going to be able to send electricity two ways. So you could use it to provide backup electricity for your home in the case of a blackout, for example. So that technology on the vehicle side is not standard in electric vehicles, but it is becoming more and more common as automakers are seeing that people want this. The second side is the ability for the grid to be able to handle a two-way flow of electricity. And so this is where you see a key overlap between the electric vehicle programs and the grid modernization programs, because we can only send electricity in a two-way flow if we have a modernized grid that has all of the cool monitoring and sensing technology of a modern grid. So both of those things need to happen in conjunction. And Kai, actually, you might be able to provide some input as to how the grid modernization proposals can allow for that two-way flow of electricity.
Yeah, so for my understanding of bidirectional EV charging is that there's both technical barriers and regulatory barriers. And we do have some practices for two-way flow on the grid because people do have rooftop solar and are able to feed the solar from their house back onto the grid. But I think I have heard of some states, for example, Delaware. I think, Mel, I'm not to just kick it back to you, but you might know more about Delaware becoming the first state to have some regulatory structure for allowing bidirectional charging. But I think the simple answer would be that there continue to be barriers. It has not been something that has come up in the current grid modernization case, but smart meters and having ways to measure and provide data on bidirectional charging and any type of behind the meter generation or power flowing onto the grid will help a lot in making this possible.
I actually didn't know about what was going on in Delaware, so that's a good call for me to kind of look at what's going on there on the regulatory side.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'll jump to another one, which I think Mal will be great at answering. Given that a gas vehicle has an on-road life of 10 to 15 years, how do we accelerate the replacement of these with EVs?
That is a great question. So in addition to our work here at the DPU, making sure that we have the electric vehicle charging infrastructure that's scaling up over the next several years, you're right, we also need to make sure that we're replacing the sale of new gas-powered cars with electric cars. So in that vein, Green Energy Consumers is working on a campaign in Massachusetts to help establish a goal that 100% of car sales by 2030 are electric. And so what that'll do is it won't, take off all of the gas-powered cars that are sold from now until 2030. Those are going to remain on the road for another 10 to 15 years, but it will make sure that we are steadily increasing the supply of electric vehicles on the road so that if you're buying a secondhand car, you'll have a steady supply to choose from. And if you're buying a new car, we think a goal like that will help make sure that the state does all of the planning that's required to reduce those barriers. So if you are interested in learning more about that, we're doing a webinar in just a few weeks to talk more about why we think a phase out of the sale of gas-powered cars is a good idea. And so I welcome you to join us for that to learn more about it. But yes, it's certainly, no matter what we do, it's not going to be a rapid shift overnight. And on some level, that can be a benefit because it means that we can ramp up investments in EV charging and preparation for the grid to make sure that we're ready to handle all of those electric cars coming along.